Chapter 182. This made She realize the hidden value of Tongning. So, she wanted to grab hold of Tongning's weakness so she could control her in the future. The day before their trip to England, Jie complained to Tongning, "Recently, I've noticed someone has been following me." Tongning furrowed her brows. She knew exactly why Jie felt this way. She had always suspected that her and Lu Che's engagement was fake. "It's been so many days, have you not seen Lu Che at all?" Tongning asked. "That day was the day we picked Grandpa up. Lu Che was kind enough to wait downstairs in the middle of winter to see if we were safe. But Grandpa believed Luo Hao, that bitch, and said that I was Lu Che's mistress. Now, Grandpa refuses to go home and keeps an eye on me. Jie, the main reason I asked Lu Che to announce that he and you are engaged, apart from protecting Ting and I, is so that you can be protected." "If you think this is a problem," Tongning said. "It's not a problem. In fact, I'm afraid Lu Che will be at a disadvantage." Jie waved her hand. "Then what if I ask the two of you to pretend to live together?" "Huh. It's just an act." The reason Tongning mentioned this was because she felt Jie had feelings for Lu Che, so she wanted to give the two of them a chance. I don't think that's a good idea." Jie's cheeks turned red. "The two of you are engaged, it's perfectly normal." Hearing this, Jie was speechless. She quickly waved her hands. "Tongning, don't do this. Otherwise, it will be even more awkward when I see Lu Che in the future. I truly treat Lu Che as a friend. If you want me to put on an act, I can cooperate. But, pretending to live together is a bit too much." Tongning was in the middle of packing her luggage. After hearing Jie's explanation, she nodded her head. "Don't blame me for not giving you a chance." "What are you thinking? Lu Che is younger than me." Jie acted like she had heard something unbelievable. In reality, the more flustered she acted, the more it proved that she had her own thoughts. She simply felt the difference between them was too big, so that was why she felt inferior. "One day, I'll ask Lu Che what type of girl he likes." "Hey, Big Boss won't be accompanying you this time?" Jie purposely changed the topic to avoid the awkwardness. Tongning thought about the pile of invitations on Mo Ting's desk and shook her head. "It's almost the end of the year, and there are more activities. I don't want him to be so tired. Also, in order to prevent him from following us, I brought the flight forward. Don't forget." "Don't worry, I've packed everything." Jie finally let out a sigh of relief that Tongning no longer had to worry about her relationship with Lu Che. Not to mention the fact that she was almost 30 years old, didn't have a high education and had no achievements in anything. Most importantly, she loved to eat. She didn't think that an elite like Lu Che would be interested in her. Sometimes, it was true that she had the urge to pursue beautiful things. However, even though she knew that there was a gap between them, she still had to go for it. She felt that she had already passed the age of persistence. Not long after Jie left Hyatt Regency, Lu Che brought over a plate of seafood sashimi from Japan. Seeing Tongning alone in the living room, his expression darkened. "Wasn't Jie here a moment ago? Why did she leave?" Tongning looked at the seafood sashimi. It was obviously not something that a nutritious person like her would eat. So, she smiled at Lu Che. "She just returned home. Why don't you chase after her?" "Forget it then," Lu Che replied. "Lu Che, can you tell me the truth? Do you feel towards Jie?" Lu Che interrupted awkwardly before Tongning could finish her sentence. He then looked down at his shiny leather shoes and replied, "Actually, I just felt sorry for her when I saw her being bullied." "Just sorry? What else could it be?" Tongning lowered her head helplessly. She already knew that Lu Che's EQ wasn't that high, but it was too low. "It's fine, I can't eat any of this. You can give it to Jie. What if her grandfather misunderstands?" "It's fine." After speaking, Lu Che turned and left Hyatt Regency, leaving Tongning staring blankly at the fresh seafood feast. After finishing his work, Mo Ting came out of the study room. Seeing Tongning's helpless expression, he couldn't help but approach her from behind and hug her. "What's wrong? You don't like to eat this either," Tongning replied as she pulled out her phone and gave Jie a phone call. Lu Che sent some seafood over by air. Do you want to bring it home to try? Long Jie had just returned home. Her focus wasn't on the seafood, but on Lu Che. She realized she couldn't help but feel tempted. But, after holding it in for a while, she still felt it wasn't right, so she rejected, forget it, I'm already home. I can't eat it and Ting doesn't like it either. It won't be fresh overnight. Otherwise, I would have to throw it away. Don't throw it away. I'll be right there. Long Jie quickly changed her clothes and returned to Hyatt Regency. She packed up all the seafood that Lu Che had sent and took it home. However, she didn't take it out to eat. Instead, she placed it in the fridge as if she had a crush on him. When you have a crush on someone, even if they were to give you a normal piece of tissue, you would treasure it and keep it so that you could dry it and turn it into a specimen. After having a shower, Tongning lay in bed thinking about Long Jie and Lu Che. Suddenly, she felt a cold sensation on her chest. It turned out, Mo Ting had undone her robe and his warm hands slid down to her waist and wrapped around her. Tongning looked at Mo Ting with misty eyes. She was a little flustered, but of course, she was also a little expectant. Since you're going to be gone for so long, shouldn't you compensate me in advance? In reality, Tongning didn't actually need Mo Ting's help. Tongning's desire for him was already the same. As long as two people were serious about each other, even a simple glance was enough to trigger an intense tsunami. Soon, the two robes were undone and scattered on the big white bed. Their bodies were pressed tightly against each other, their sweat intertwined, and their hands were intertwined. This made the love seem especially intense in the dark, and it made one's face blush and heart race. Neither of them liked to talk, so Mo Ting was more familiar with Tongning's moans and breaths. Especially when she couldn't help but bite his shoulder when they were aroused, Mo Ting couldn't help but fall deeply in love with the woman in his arms from head to toe. He wanted to blend in with her like this until the end of time. But, the thing that made Tongning's heart flutter the most was, no matter what Mo Ting demanded, no matter how embarrassing they were after falling from the clouds, he would always pull her into his embrace. Chapter 183. He hugged her tightly. There was no expression or comfort, but the action of a tight hug was better than 1,000 words. A moment later, Mo Ting suddenly sat up with Tongning in his arms. Just as he was about to get off the bed, Tongning held him back. Mo Ting was confused. Tongning was like a shameless doll as she leaned into Mo Ting's embrace. Mo Ting turned on the bedside lamp and gently stroked Tongning's back with a slight smile. Aren't you going to shower? I just want you to hug me like this. Tongning buried her head into Mo Ting's chest. I don't want to be separated from you. Didn't you refuse to let me go to England with you? I just don't want you to be too tired. You just don't want me to be too tired. In reality, both of them were well aware of this. But, for Mo Ting, who had slowly turned doting on his wife into his career, how could he possibly let her stay in London on her own? But, he did not tell Tongning. He simply waited to give his wife another surprise. That night, the two of them couldn't sleep. They hugged each other and chatted until dawn. Not long after, Zihao and Long Jie arrived at Hyatt Regency to pick Tongning up. However, before they left, Tongning still clung onto Mo Ting. Wait for me. Mo Ting stretched out his hand and stroked Tongning's long hair. The wedding ring between his fingers shone brightly under the sunlight. After arriving at the airport, Long Jie suddenly realized she had forgotten to bring her passport. However, grandfather was definitely taking a walk at this time and there was no way she could go back the way she came. There was no time. Tongning remembered her old apartment wasn't too far from Hai Rui, so she asked Long Jie to give Lu Che a phone call. She knew Long Jie had a habit of hiding her keys. Long Jie hesitated for a moment. In the end, work was more important. So, she bit the bullet and gave Lu Che a phone call. Lu Che. What happened? I forgot to take my passport. Can you come to my house? The house key is hidden in the mailbox at the door. The passport should still be on the bed. Originally, Lu Che didn't have time. Mo Ting still had a lot of documents waiting for him to deliver. If it was anyone else, he would have told them to leave. But, it was Long Jie. No matter how troublesome it was, he couldn't refuse it. Just you wait. Lu Che was actually more aware of the boarding time than the others, so he immediately drove over to Long Jie's apartment and successfully found the key. Actually, the furnishings in the house were pretty much the same as when Tongning left. This wasn't Lu Chei's first time here, but without Long Jie around, he felt a little nervous. He pushed open the door and entered Long Jie's room. The passport was indeed on the bed, but there was also a pile of bras and panties that Long Jie hadn't had time to tidy up. Lu Chei's face turned slightly red as he grabbed his passport and left. In his heart, only things that belonged to his future wife could be looked at in such a way. However, because he was in too much of a rush, Lu Chei bumped into a chair, causing him to groan in pain. Even when he arrived at the airport, he was still limping. However, he pretended to be calm. "Sorry for making you come all the way here. I'm fine." Lu Chei took out his passport and leaned against the car door, pretending to be cool. "Have a safe journey." Long Jie was in a hurry, so she didn't notice Lu Chei's expression as she rushed into the airport. As for Lu Chei, he waited until she was far away before lifting up his trousers to take a look. The skin on his left knee had been scraped off. What an idiot. Of course, there were even more idiots. Because the airport departure lounge was on the second floor, Tongning and Zihao could see Lu Chei's reaction from downstairs. "I bet the collision was pretty bad," Zihao teased Lu Chei as he sipped on his coffee. "Two blockheads bumping into each other. There's going to be a good show to watch." Tongning laughed. But, wasn't love supposed to turn someone into an idiot and make them do stupid things for each other? Thinking about it, it was quite sweet. Because she was worried about bumping into fans, Tongning didn't dare to walk around casually. But, to her surprise, she once again saw the tall and skinny man. It was the reporter from Hua Rong that bumped into Mo Ting dropping her off at the airport. Tongning's memory had always been good, especially when it came to people with bad intentions. She was able to quickly remember their gaze and analyze their intentions. This time, the man was polite as he handed her his business card. "Miss Tang, do you still remember me?" A reporter from Hua Rong, Tongning blurted out. The man was a little surprised that Tongning could accurately identify his agency without looking at his business card. But, it only lasted for a moment before he recovered his smile. "I didn't expect to bump into you here. Are you attending the London fashion show?" Tongning nodded her head politely. "Are you not here with your previous boyfriend?" The man scanned Tongning's surroundings. After confirming there was no one suspicious, he let her off the hook. "In that case, I'll see you in London." "What's this all about?" Zihao immediately asked. "What do you mean by previous boyfriend?" "Last time, when Hai Rui was in trouble, I accompanied Mo Ting overseas. This reporter saw me getting out of Mo Ting's car, but he had no idea it was Mo Ting," Tongning explained. "I'm afraid we won't have a good week in London. Someone is going to have their eyes on us." "What are you afraid of? President Mo didn't come with us." Zihao tried to calm Tongning down. Compared to this reporter, he was more worried about Lan Shi playing some tricks. Of course, Tongning would have never imagined that a small studio like this would end up entangling with her. "Has Tongning already set off for London?" Lan Shi asked Luo Hao, who was pacing back and forth in Cheng Tian Entertainment's office. "She should be on a plane right now," Luo Hao replied. "Have you already made arrangements in London?" "This time, we've found a famous Korean paparazzi. If Tongning does anything suspicious, it will be impossible for her to escape their cameras," Luo Hao said as he twirled his fingers. He had a calm and arrogant expression on his face. He had always been the epitome of a hypocrite, everyone knew this. "Give them all the privileges they want, until they find what we are looking for," Lan Shi yelled before turning to Luo Hao. "We need to find a few more newcomers to train. I don't feel comfortable with only Hua Yuan." By the time Tongning and her entourage arrived in London, it was noon in the UK. As Tongning boarded her car, she glanced at the reporter from Hua Rong. This man was very strange. He was not one of the clingy paparazzi, but he exuded a dangerous aura. Tongning made sure she was on guard against him and did not throw his business card into the bin. Tongning received a phone call from Mo Ting 10 minutes after she landed. After checking in with her husband that she was safe, she decided to check in at the hotel arranged by the agency. "JK's show is in 2 days. We need to go for an interview first." Although Cheng Tian recommended you to be the opening act, we can't confirm it yet. You can make the arrangements. Tongning, what do you think of Lan Shi forgetting to give you resources? And Zihao had always wanted to know. Chapter 184. JK is a top fashion brand, why would I reject them? But, since she gave me such a great resource, I'm sure the thing she wants won't be simple. I will be careful, and Zihao replied. Hurry and get used to your jet lag. You have a lot of work ahead of you. After Zihao left, Tongning lay in bed and closed her eyes. She should have been exhausted, but her mind was becoming more and more awake. This was because they were on an international runway. It was completely different to the small shows she had previously attended. If she could really walk on JK's runway, she would definitely be able to grab hold of more international resources. But, between her and Mo Ting, it seemed, there was only one step between them. Perhaps it was because their minds were connected. Mo Ting unexpectedly gave her another phone call. Tongning held onto her phone and couldn't help but laugh. How did you know I was thinking about you? It was already nighttime in Beijing. After returning home and not seeing any familiar figures, Mo Ting naturally thought, Tongning wasn't a noisy person, but he felt the house was cold and empty. Without her around, he wasn't used to it. Mrs. Mo, if you are really gone for a week, my body and mind will be tormented. I want to see you right now, I want to hug you and kiss you. Being in a foreign country and lying on a completely unfamiliar bed, Tongning was the one who was truly tormented. But, President Mo, from tonight onwards, I have a lot of work to do. I will have to endure for now. Endure? He never intended to endure. So, as Mo Ting coaxed Tongning to sleep, he sent Lu Che a message telling him to book a plane ticket to London. However, after a quick meeting with Tongning, he immediately flew back to Beijing. He had an important banquet that night. After receiving Mo Ting's message, Lu Che wondered if it was really necessary for Mo Ting to fly for 20 hours just to see Tongning. Ting, wait for me. Soon, I will be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with you. Hearing Tongning's words, Mo Ting's heart was moved. So what if he had to fly for 20 hours? He had already said, as long as Tongning wanted to do something, he would accompany her. Even if it was just a quick meeting was good enough. 6 p.m., Tongning and Zihao arrived at JK's show venue. The venue was located in a large church on the outskirts of London. JK's main theme for this episode was soul and rebirth. All of the costumes were mainly black and white, with black datura flowers, black and white wings, and other elements that represented darkness and light completely integrated into the costumes. It was as though the two extremes of life were pulling at each other. Now that she was at the international fashion show, it was rare to see such chaotic scenes. In the spacious backstage, there were only models changing and applying makeup. This made Tongning feel like she had returned to her 19-year-old self in France. While Zihao was communicating with JK, Tongning was in the backstage trying on her makeup. At such a high-class fashion show, apart from her, there were no other Asian faces. After all, there weren't many Asian models that were qualified to appear in such a high-class fashion show. Tongning stood in front of the mirror. From head to toe, she was only wearing a pair of black underwear. This was the norm for a model. At this moment, all she had to do was stretch out her arms and someone would put on the clothes that the designer was satisfied with. JK's designer was a 40-something-year-old man. He could be considered half a Beijinger. With a full beard, his entire body was filled with an artistic aura. As he scanned Tongning from head to toe, he realized her legs were so beautiful that it was impossible to ignore them. So, with a snap of his fingers, he instructed his assistant to bring over his finale outfit for Tongning to try on. It was a deep V black dress. The body of the dress was made from a translucent black chiffon with black web-like threads intertwining with each other. It was like a trapped soul. On her left shoulder, there was a blooming black datura flower that extended from her shoulder to her lower abdomen. The darkness. The evil. The struggle. As soon as Tongning put it on, the aura she gave off was like an evil force that had been trapped for a long time. It was about to break free and regain its freedom. This is the feeling of evil breaking free. Okay, very good. You will be the finale. What was originally supposed to be an opening had become the finale. This was completely unexpected for Tongning. But what was even more unexpected was, JK's show had to be paired up with a male model. In order to get the order right, they had to walk in advance. It was only when Tongning stepped onto the stage that she saw the man for the first time. He was a 1'9" tall supermodel. He was young, handsome, and looked to be in his early 20s. He had a pair of deep blue eyes that were filled with charisma and confidence. However, just as Tongning brushed shoulders with him, he suddenly stretched out his hand and took the opportunity to pinch Tongning's thigh. Tongning turned her head and looked at him coldly. She was trying to warn him. "Sorry, your legs are too beautiful. I really want to kiss them," the man said straightforwardly. "If you continue to act like this, I will think this is how British people are raised," Tongning warned. After speaking, she separated from the male model. The young model did not care as he continued to smile foolishly at Tongning. After walking in, Tongning stepped off the stage. And Zihao immediately handed her a jacket and helped her put it on. What just happened? What happened to that male model? Nothing. Tongning simply assumed the man was confused. Actually, at a show like this, it was common for someone to touch someone and then take the opportunity to hug someone else. Especially backstage. Anything could be seen. Tongning put on her jacket and prepared to return backstage with Zihao. But, because she was very sensitive to cameras, she noticed an unusual flash of light coming from a corner. "It looks like someone is secretly taking photos," Tongning said to Zihao. Zihao glanced at Tongning and followed her gaze to the corner. He then patted her on the shoulder. "Go get changed backstage first." "Leave this to me." Tongning nodded her head. She had a rough guess, so she did not immediately head backstage. Instead, she watched as Zihao walked towards a corner of the church. A moment later, a black shadow appeared from under the chair. Perhaps it was because the shadow was too professional and had become used to escaping, and Zihao did not manage to catch it. Forget it, there are plenty of people out there that spy on design secrets. It may not be directed at me. Perhaps I am overthinking things. And Zihao returned to Tongning's side and shielded her. "I will be more careful. Let's go get changed first." However, they had no idea that this was one of the South Korean paparazzi that Luo Hao had sent. After escaping from the church, he held onto his camera and smiled proudly. His luck was not bad. He managed to capture a photo of Tongning flirting with a male model. The scene of them touching each other's legs was captured in high definition. It didn't take long before Luo Hao, who was back in China, received a photo from the paparazzi. This was only the first day, yet Tongning. By the time she returned because she thought she could be gilded, she would find that her name had become infamous. Chapter 185. In reality, the reporter from Hua Rong Studio was also present at the show. He had been searching for an artist that could make him famous. Tongning had always been known for keeping a low profile. But, ever since he saw her say goodbye to a man intimately in the US, she had left a deep impression on him. So, this time in London, he was confident he would be able to capture an intimate photo of her with the man and obtain evidence. Of course, he was disdainful of the paparazzi who kept snapping photos of Tongning. Material like this was only used for low-level hype. Only low-level hype would be used. What he wanted to capture was evidence of Tongning being intimate with a man. So, his hotel room was located opposite Tongning's. November in London wasn't as cold as Beijing. A simple trench coat was enough to keep out the cold. On the way back to the hotel, Tongning closed her eyes and took a nap. Long Jie knelt in front of her and gave her a massage. Her heart ached as she pinched her calves. Due to wearing high heels for a long time, Tongning's leg muscles were tight. As they entered the hotel's underground car park, Zihao was the first to step out of the car. As soon as he saw Mo Ting, dressed in a black trench coat, leaning against his sports car, he couldn't help but be stunned. Tongning had already fallen asleep. Long Jie jumped out of the car and was about to wake her up when Mo Ting gestured for her to be quiet. He then bent over and carried Tongning out of the back seat. He let her lean firmly in his arms. "This hotel isn't safe. I will take her to the manor." And Zihao nodded his head and reminded, "You need to start work at 7 a.m. tomorrow. Come pick her up tomorrow morning." I will send the address to you. After speaking, Mo Ting placed Tongning in his sports car and sped away. And Zihao thought back to Mo Ting's words about the hotel not being safe and the paparazzi at the church today. As a manager, he didn't want to think too much about it. But he knew Lan Shi was definitely capable of doing something like this. He thought back to the time he was intimate with Yun Xin and the shadow in the shadows. He thought back to the past that he had long sealed away. He really didn't want Yun Xin's death to have anything to do with Lan Shi. The Maybach sped along and stopped at a manor. As it was a private property, the security system was top-notch. Mo Ting unbuckled his seatbelt and looked at Tongning, at the woman that he missed every minute of separation. They only had 2 hours to see each other, yet she chose to sleep alone, but Mo Ting didn't want to wake her up. He simply hugged her and hugged her. Even if it was just a whiff of her scent, he was satisfied. However, before her exhaustion from wearing high heels for a long period of time on a plane and walking on the runway had subsided, her legs suddenly cramped up. She opened her eyes in pain and bumped into Mo Ting's chest. Tongning was stunned. She almost thought she was dreaming. A moment later, Mo Ting released her from his embrace and lifted her legs onto his knees. With a pair of strong hands, he gently held onto her calves. Why are you here? I'll charge it. Mo Ting replied. Tongning happily stretched out her arms and hugged Mo Ting. To her, Mo Ting was like air to her. You only have 2 hours, what do you want to do? Mo Ting asked as he gently patted her back. We can only see each other for 2 hours. Why did you come? Tongning patted him on the shoulder helplessly. It's a 20-hour flight and we still have to cross the ocean. As long as I can hug you for 2 seconds, these 20 hours will be worth it. So, even you know how to do things like this. Tongning turned her head and placed a kiss on Mo Ting's earlobe. She then moved her lips to his. However, Mo Ting did not move an inch. He did not have the slightest reaction. If you don't want it, then forget it. Mo Ting didn't wait for Tongning to retreat as he held onto her cheeks and passionately planted a passionate kiss on her face without holding anything back. Tongning did not return to the hotel. This was what the paparazzi in England told Lan Shi and Luo Hao. The two were still in Cheng Tian's office late at night. They looked at each other and asked, "Did you find out where she went?" "We were afraid of being exposed, so we didn't dare to follow her closely. We simply noticed the lights in her room were off, so we became suspicious. Continue to keep an eye out. If you see any evidence, don't miss it." Lan Shi hung up the video call and turned to ask Luo Hao, "What do you think Tongning is doing at a time like this? What else could she be doing? If she's not in her room, apart from fooling around with a man, is there any reason for her to go out? There's no use talking, you need to get a photo." After seeing photos of Tongning flirting with a model, they were confident in this Korean paparazzi. The reporters from Hua Rong studio also noticed something was amiss. Tongning did not return to the hotel. And Zihao and Long Jie's rooms were lit up, only Tongning's room was unresponsive. He immediately thought back to the day at the airport in the US. There were so many hotels, he might as well wait at the airport. Perhaps God would give him a pleasant surprise. Time passed slowly while they were at work, but as long as they were together, time seemed to pass by in the blink of an eye. This was a short and hard-earned 2 hours. The couple did not go anywhere. They simply kissed and hugged in the car, not a second was wasted. There are at least 4 paparazzi staying at the hotel booked by Cheng Tian. Before you returned, I spoke to the manager of the hotel and looked at the surveillance footage. These 4 people are following the same path as you. Mo Ting explained to Tongning before he left. The hotel was booked by Cheng Tian, so of course he couldn't let it go. So, the first thing he needed to do was to check the hotel's safety. After listening to Mo Ting, Tongning told him everything that happened at the church. "I've already asked Lu Che to investigate their background. Don't be afraid." Tongning let out a gentle laugh as she shook her head. "I'm not afraid. I just need to find out if they were sent by the media or by Cheng Tian. Even though, I'm not sure what Lan Shi's motive is." Mo Ting ran his hand through Tongning's hair without saying a word. He was secretly opening Hai Rui's doors for Tongning. "It can't be anything good. Be careful. It's still early to work. Go to the manor and get some sleep. I'll send you to the airport, Tongning replied. Mo Ting held onto her shoulder and shook his head. Do you want to see how tired you look? Be a good girl. As soon as I have time, I will fly over. Tongning did not insist. She simply placed her forehead against Mo Ting's and enjoyed the last bit of intimacy. So, Mo Ting came and left on his own. Hua Rong's reporter had been waiting at the airport the entire time. As soon as he saw the sunglasses wearing Mo Ting, he had no idea that Mo Ting was the man he wanted to photograph. He simply sighed. The CEO of Hai Rui was indeed a legend. Chapter 186. Lu Che sent over some information. The paparazzi following Tongning were all from South Korea. They were a very professional group. Lu Che also found out that the reason they were sent out was because they had contact with Cheng Tian's artist's director, Luo Hao. The answer was obvious. And Zihao's expression did not look good. He suddenly realized a lot of things. Back then, although the incident between him and Yun Xin was exposed by Yongjing and Luo Hao, the person that provided the evidence was the shadow that was hiding in the dark. In other words, was it Lan Shi? So many years had passed since the incident with Yun Xin. Was Lan Shi planning to use the same trick again? After taking Yun Xin's life, did she want to take Tongning's life as well? I wonder what that group of people managed to capture. I used to really like President Lan. I felt she was capable and generous like a heroine. Yet, she turned out to be such a heartless and unscrupulous person. Long Jie couldn't help but sigh. Tongning sat on the hotel bed, her heart extremely calm. No matter how ruthless Lan Shi was, it couldn't stop her determination to become an international supermodel. Lan Shi was ruthless, but she could actually be even more ruthless than Lan Shi. Seeing Tongning so quiet, and Zihao was actually a little afraid of her. After spending so much time together, he had a certain understanding of Tongning. She was also a type of silence, but Tongning's calmness was enough to reveal her different state of mind. For example, when she was with Mo Ting, her calmness carried a sense of relaxation. For example, when she was with outsiders, her calmness carried a sense of alienation. For example, at this moment, Tongning's calmness had reached a frightening point. The more she remained silent, the more likely it was that she was thinking of a way to retaliate against Lan Shi. Lan Shi had already gotten to this point. So, Tongning's future was no longer with Cheng Tian. What do you plan to do? What else can I do? I'll let her take as many photos as she wants. Tongning revealed a gentle smile. She didn't seem to care. But, and Zihao knew, if Lan Shi was the mantis, then Tongning would be the Oriole. Your current mission is to focus on JK's show. No matter how important anything else is, it won't be more important than the show. But, Lan Shi may not be willing to let me appear on the runway. Right now, she is considering whether to use me or destroy me. Tongning's mind was as clear as ever as she lifted her head and looked into Zihao's eyes. If you were Lan Shi, what would you choose? The problem is that she hasn't captured anything yet. Not necessarily. Tongning was referring to the incident where the male model touched her thigh. As long as Lan Shi wanted to, even if it was a small matter, with careful planning, it could destroy her reputation. Just focus on preparing for the show. As for everything else, I'll handle it, and Zihao instructed in seriousness. Tongning smiled. She trusted Zihao, but not completely. In this world, the only person she could truly trust was Mo Ting. Tongning, I really didn't know you were in such a difficult situation. Is Lan Shi following you like this partly because she's afraid Lu Che and I are just a front for you and you are the one truly connected to Hai Rui? Tongning looked at Lan Shi. After hearing this, Tongning shook her head. No. If Lan Shi really suspected that I was having an affair with Hai Rui, then it wouldn't be hard for her to guess my relationship with Mo Ting. She has never believed that Mo Ting would be interested in me. Why? Because even Mo Ting didn't like her. In her eyes, Mo Ting, who didn't even like her, wouldn't have the time to play around with a small model like me. In reality, deep down, Lan Shi was an arrogant person. She would not allow others to be better than her, nor would she allow others to escape her control. How arrogant. Although Long Jie felt a little better after hearing Tongning's comforting words, Long Jie still felt a little better. But she felt that since Tongning had tried her best to hide her relationship with Mo Ting, it wasn't time to reveal it yet. So, as soon as she returned to her room, she sent Lu Che a message. After sending the message, she felt like her brain had gone numb as she leaned against the wall with a red face. "Why don't we move in together?" Lu Che was in the middle of handling some documents. As soon as he saw Long Jie's message, he was shocked as he immediately replied with a string of question marks. This person with low EQ thought Long Jie had sent the message to the wrong person. "Aren't we an engaged couple? Why don't we pretend to move in together? Since you already have the keys to my house, why don't you drop by from time to time? Is your brain gone numb?" Long Jie. Low EQ was a type of illness. After Long Jie and An Zihao returned to their respective rooms, Tongning walked over to her bed and pulled back the curtains to admire the night view of London. In her heart, she thought about how Lan Shi wanted to deal with her and how she would deal with Lan Shi. But, if Lan Shi wanted her life. The next morning, Tongning was awoken by a knock on her door. She thought it was either An Zihao or Long Jie. But, as she got changed and opened the door, she was greeted by the young male model from yesterday. "I finally found you, beautiful oriental legs." The man stretched out his arms to give Tongning a hug, but Tongning quickly dodged. "My name is Gabby. I really want to meet you. Goddess, you are very sexy." Tongning did not respond as she closed the door and gave An Zihao a phone call. At a time like this, for a man like this to appear, Tongning couldn't help but connect him to the man from Chengtian. An Zihao quickly dealt with the male model and returned to Tongning's room. "You are currently being followed and these random people have suddenly appeared out of nowhere. It is quite suspicious." If even An Zihao had noticed, how could Tongning not know? "Lan Shi is really closing in on us." Not only this, Luo Hao, who was even more cunning than Lan Shi, knew deep down that Tongning was not easy to deal with. If he continued to drag things out, she would definitely retaliate. So, Luo Hao did not ask for Lan Shi's permission as he directly posted the photos he had in his hands online. The title was, "Tongning's virtuous mask is torn as she flirts with a male model." The article even hinted that he was an insider and knew Tongning had a boyfriend. But, on one hand, she was flirting with the Backview Dream Man, while on the other hand, she was seducing a male model overseas. He couldn't stand to watch any longer. Tongning had always been known for her innocence. Now that there was such a lustful accusation, the netizens immediately joined in the scolding war. Female celebrities were different from male celebrities. Even if a male celebrity had these scandals, they would be quickly buried. But when it came to a female celebrity, even if they were innocent, they would still be held onto by others. In fact, the media would dig up dirt on them from time to time. Lustful. No one expected this. Luo Hao's actions were too fast and too ruthless. Especially when it was related to the word lustful. It was something that men loved to search for. It didn't take long before it became #1 in popularity. However, at this time, Mo Ting had just stepped off the plane. Chapter 187. After seeing the news, Lan Shi's face turned scarlet red. Holding onto an entertainment magazine, she stomped into Luo Hao's office in high heels and threw it in front of him. "Why did you make the decision on your own?" Luo Hao put down the documents in his hands and stood up from his chair. He then explained to Lan Shi, "Because, if we wait any longer, Tongning will retaliate. She is a woman that likes to think. With the information we have, it is enough to destroy her. Since that's the case, why should we continue to wait?" Lan Shi did not respond. To be exact, she knew Luo Hao was doing the right thing, but she didn't like people that made decisions on their own. Tongning was currently in the UK. As long as Cheng Tian did not interfere with PR and allowed the scandal to spread, all that awaited Tongning was the hatred and destruction of the netizens. Don't forget, Tongning was even able to walk away from the bed-climbing scandal. This time, I will not let her make a comeback. I have a series of preparations. After speaking, Luo Hao showed Lan Shi the information he had prepared. As long as Tongning dared to refute him, he would hand over a set of information to slap her in the face. He refused to believe that this time, no one would be able to save Tongning. Oh God, I never thought Tongning would appear so aloof on the outside, but on the inside, she is actually so lustful. I previously heard that when she went overseas for work, she never stayed in a hotel arranged by the agency. Where else could she have gone? She must have found someone to satisfy her lust. Didn't she say she doesn't have a boyfriend? Previously, during Feng Cai's interview, I already felt her relationship with the Backview Dream Man was a bit ambiguous. Am I the only one that noticed she seduced a married man? I've already said this bitch has a problem. Yet, a bunch of people praised her for having a high EQ. She's almost been hyped up. Isn't she just a model? Dominating the trending searches all day long, is that okay? I bet that woman is still lying under a foreign hunk. In an instant, comments attacking Tongning threatened to crash the servers. As for the media outlet that released the news, they had never seen such a high number of reposts before. They couldn't stop laughing. Tell the bitch to stay in London and never come back. After the incident broke out, the media immediately contacted Cheng Tian Entertainment to ask the artist's director if he was aware of Tongning's situation. Luo Hao simply replied, "I'm not too sure." After the incident broke out, Cheng Tian Entertainment did not do anything. This gave the public a signal. Cheng Tian Entertainment had chosen to be passive towards Tongning's matter. This meant there was indeed a problem with Tongning, and Cheng Tian Entertainment had no choice but to give up. The media immediately contacted An Zihao. At this time, An Zihao was watching Tongning's rehearsal. When he received the phone call, he had no idea what was going on. He immediately asked Long Jie to do a search on his phone. Long Jie did not look too good. As she handed it to An Zihao, her neck was red with anger. An Zihao received the phone and looked at it. He gestured for her to comfort Tongning and not let her see through his act. Right now, the most important thing to her was JK's show. Long Jie tried her best to suppress the anger in her heart as she made an okay gesture. An Zihao held onto his phone as he walked out of the venue. Standing outside the church, he gave Lan Shi a phone call. "President Lan, you sure have a good plan. Tongning sure is unlucky. After working so hard for so long, in the end, she has been slandered by her own agency. This time, she can be completely blackened. Doesn't that mean your wish has come true? Zihao, even if you give up on Tongning, there are still thousands of Tangnings out there. She only has herself to blame for her current situation. Don't you know that?" Lan Shi scoffed in disdain. If she was a little more obedient and didn't think too much, she would definitely have a bright future ahead of her. Not to mention JK's show, even the best would be hers. Since she has gotten to this point, she can't blame anyone. And Zihao took a deep breath. He suddenly felt Lan Shi was quite pitiful. Tongning simply wanted to pursue her dreams. She didn't get in anyone's way. So, "I'm sorry, Lan Shi." Lan Shi could tell there was a hidden meaning in An Zihao's words as her eyebrows slowly furrowed. "What do you mean?" An Zihao hesitated for a moment before asking, "Did you also cause Yunxin's death?" Hearing this question, hearing this name that hadn't been mentioned for a long time, Lan Shi froze for a moment before scoffing. "You know better than me how Yunxin died. As for Tongning, I want her to never be able to reincarnate." An Zihao felt he had nothing else to say to Lan Shi, so he hung up the phone. However, he did not make this phone call for nothing, because he had recorded it. Afterwards, An Zihao picked up a call from the Beijing media and yelled, "None of this is the truth. I hope the media can follow their professional ethics and not insult someone's innocence." Hai Rui's CEO's office. After returning to Beijing, Mo Ting had just sat down when he saw the rumor online. He immediately gave An Zihao a phone call. "Mo Ting, don't worry, Tongning doesn't know yet. I have no intention of letting her know in case it affects her JK show." An Zihao reassured. "Plus, I have a recording in my hands that proves Lan Shi deliberately defamed Tongning. Take good care of Tongning, don't let her mood be affected. Also send me the recording," Mo Ting instructed. The Mo Ting at this moment was completely different to how he normally felt when he was with Tongning. It was at this moment that An Zihao realized this Mo Ting was the same Mo Ting that the public was familiar with. He was an absolute king that had the power to rule over everything. "I'll send it over right away." An Zihao felt that if he kept the recording in his hands, it wouldn't be as useful as handing it to Mo Ting. So, and Zihao directly sent the recording to Mo Ting. However, he forgot that there was a part of the recording that talked about Yun Xin's death. Mo Ting received the recording and listened to it once. He then instructed someone to get rid of the part of Yun Xin and handed it to Lu Che for him to investigate. Put this recording on the most eye-catching headline and place it in the hottest spot for a month. No one is allowed to remove it from the hottest searches. Let's call it, Tongning got defamed because she offended you. A month. Lu Che was a little surprised. Didn't that mean Cheng Tian was waiting to be gang-raped? A month. On top of that, get some of the media to extract the single sentence in the recording and find a professional team to create a joke for President Lan. Doesn't she want absolute power? I'll give it to her right now. After speaking, Mo Ting handed his phone to Lu Che. Remember, if anyone wants to buy the rankings, use double the price to suppress them. Put Cheng Tian's news on the headlines for a month. Chapter 188. Hey, have you guys seen the recording on the top trending topic? What gossip is it this time? What else could it be? It turns out the CEO of Cheng Tian Entertainment hired someone to slander Tongning yesterday because she didn't listen to her. Oh God, who does she think she is? Does she think she's a god that rules over others? Another reversal? Netizens quickly clicked open the top trending topic and discovered it was a complete recording. Rumor had it that the voices belonged to Tongning's manager, An Zihao, and Cheng Tian's CEO, Lan Shi. Plenty of people had seen them before, so they were certain the voices belonged to them. As for the recording, it was An Zihao questioning Lan Shi about why she wasn't satisfied after she had ruined Tongning's reputation. In response, Lan Shi arrogantly explained that it was because Tongning was disobedient that she decided to take revenge. She didn't even hesitate to destroy her own model. Netizens began to discuss, the entertainment industry was indeed a deep pool. When looking at the truth, one should never look at the surface. Afterwards, Tongning quickly became the weaker party. Especially those that had similar experiences, they immediately expressed their own experiences and expressed their support for Tongning in the comments below the post. Being rich is great, but being rich enough to destroy other people's dreams and lives is completely rubbish. Lan Shi is just the tip of the iceberg. Forgive me for being blunt, but the entertainment industry is a stinking drain that only holds rubbish. Actually, I want to say, who posted this message? Really, it's kind of cool. The reason why Tongning is being slandered is because she has stood in the way of too many people. She is too pure and innocent. The industry loves to associate with evil. Tongning, if you continue to be so innocent, you will be done for. But, I will still support you. By the way, did you ask someone to post this on the headlines? If it was, please accept my knees. In less than a day, the tables had turned. Of course, the audience had already gotten used to Tongning being slandered, so they weren't too surprised by the final reversal. But, the content that was revealed was still enough for them to discuss excitedly. Meanwhile, night had just fallen. Inside Lan Shi's high-class apartment, she sat on the soft sofa, staring at the headlines of the entertainment news. Her heart was filled with anger. Lan Shi pulled out her phone and gave Luo Hao a phone call, telling him to find someone to deal with it. But Luo Hao told her, it's no use. If I pay to take down the rankings, the other party will immediately double the price. Did you find out who did this? Lan Shi stood up from the sofa and paced back and forth in the living room, and Zihao was definitely the one who gave us the recording, but who is behind this powerful and influential person? Who did An Zihao contact? I can't find anything. It could be An Zihao himself, or it could be him and Tongning. Or perhaps, An Zihao has found an opponent. Didn't you say it's foolproof? Didn't you say you were going to destroy Tongning's reputation? Who was the one who got beaten up in the end? It's me. Do you know how embarrassed I felt when the higher-ups of Cheng Tian saw this? I can't wait to find a hole to hide in. Lan, she said angrily. Because of her emotions, her stomach hurt as she knelt on the floor. And Zihao has been in the industry for so many years. Even if it's not as easy to build connections as before, finding your enemies is a piece of cake. So, President Lan removing An Zihao from his position as Tongning's manager cannot be delayed. The first thing Luo Hao thought of was to separate Tongning and An Zihao. But they had never thought that in fact, the person that had been playing them like monkeys behind their backs was Mo Ting. It had always been Mo Ting. Anyway, didn't you plan to poach someone from another agency? According to An Zihao's capabilities, doing something like this is the best way to make use of him. We need to make sure Tongning is isolated and helpless before we can move on to the next step. They had just made a move and they were already beaten up. Yet, they still wanted to move on to the next step. Lan Shi knelt on the sofa and took deep breaths. First, think of a way to remove the headlines. Then, give An Zihao a phone call and ask him to find a new manager. I know what to do. Luo Hao was indeed meticulous and calm. But sometimes, there were some things that a mere artist director like him could not change. For example, take Cheng Tian's search results for example. No matter what he did, he couldn't shake them off. London. Tonight, JK's show was about to begin. Over the past 2 days, Tongning had been busy rehearsing, meeting with JK's designers and trying to gain control of the company's resources. So, she had no idea Beijing was in chaos because of her. Lan Shi and An Zihao's recording had yet to be removed from the front page of the internet. As a result, Cheng Tian had suffered a lot of damage, especially to their reputation. But, who was to blame? As soon as Tongning had time, she would call Mo Ting. But, Mo Ting did not tell her about this interesting incident. Because of the exposure of the recording, the paparazzi that Lan Shi had previously hired had no choice but to withdraw. But, this didn't mean Tongning wasn't in danger. Don't forget, there was still a reporter from Hua Rong waiting to catch her. Are you nervous? Take a deep breath. Just before the show started, Long Jie asked as she fanned Tongning. Tongning looked at the chaotic backstage with a calm expression. I can't believe it. This time, no one was going to steal her finale and no one was going to argue with her. This was a runway that belonged solely to her, a runway that was purely for the sake of Asian models. You can't believe Lan Shi hasn't come to cause trouble, right? Long Jie smiled. Right now, she can't even take care of herself. How could she have the time to deal with you? What do you mean? Long Jie did not say a word, but she had a meaningful smile on her face. Of course, she did not tell Tongning that there was a person that had once again left work to travel across the ocean just to witness her every beautiful moment. This person was in the audience. Seeing Long Jie did not respond, Tongning did not ask any further. After all, she was going to find out sooner or later. An Zihao is still on the phone outside. Let me go check on him, the show is about to start. Long Jie was afraid Tongning would ask, so she found an excuse to leave to look for An Zihao. At this time, An Zihao was filled with anger and complicated emotions. It was the agency's decision to let you leave Tongning. As long as you are still Cheng Tian's manager, you will have to obey our arrangement. On the other end of the phone, Luo Hao said firmly. Of course, you can leave Cheng Tian, but Tongning will still be a model. We will find a new manager to follow her, so there is no need for you. If you put more effort into training newcomers, you will have more than just Hua Yuan. Why must you always go against Tongning? An Zihao couldn't understand. Lan Shi actually wanted to remove him from his position as Tongning's manager. Chapter 189. It's not that we want to go against Tongning, it's that Tongning wants to go against us. The agency is a team, but as the agency's model, when has Tongning ever obeyed Lan Shi's orders? An Zihao, don't forget, without Cheng Tian, there would be no you and there would be no Tongning today. Luo Hao's words were powerful, his tone was filled with arrogance and mockery. No, An Zihao, you have already lost the right to be a top manager because you betrayed Lan Shi. After hearing Luo Hao's words, An Zihao's lips curved upwards in mockery. However, his mood was no longer as heavy as before. Luo Hao, whether I have the right or not is not up to you to decide. After all, the position of artist's director was given to you by Lan Shi because I gave it up. I seem to understand how to be a manager better than you. Plus, you need to be a person first. As for my position, no one in Cheng Tian can replace me. I believe, with my experience and knowledge of Cheng Tian's secrets, even if Lan Shi were to choose someone to leave, it would not be me, and Zihao. After speaking, and Zihao hung up the phone. He had no intention of taking Lan Shi's orders to heart. However, this conversation was eventually overheard by Long Jie, who had come out to look for Tongning. The show has already started, do you want to watch? Of course I want to watch. This is Tongning's international runway. What did the international runway represent? His inbox was filled with invitations. The emails that were once in Chinese had all been converted to English. This was before Tongning had even walked on the runway. JK's publicity campaign had already included a mysterious Asian face. The reason why people had faith in Tongning was because of the Oriental trend that she had created in North America. Over the past few years, Oriental elements had become a popular element in the fashion industry. And Zihao and Long Jie looked at each other. Just as they were about to enter the church, they turned around and saw two Americans, a man and a woman, squatting on the steps and smoking. Originally, this wasn't a big deal, but Zihao was sensitive enough to overhear the words Tongning coming from their mouths. How much did you receive from them? Those nouveau riches from the East Shore offered a lot of money. However, I only told Gabby half the amount and he agreed to push that Asian model down on the runway today. Gabby. And Zihao remembered this name, it was Tongning's runway partner. He wanted to push Tongning down on the runway? And Zihao wore a complicated expression on his face. Because, if Tongning fell on the international stage, he knew better than anyone what it meant. It meant that Tongning's international career could very well come to an end. As for why Gabby wanted to frame Tongning for the sake of money, it had to be explained from the current state of the modeling industry. Male models and female models were different. Most male models worked part-time and only a small number of them were able to make a name for themselves. Their appearance fees could not be compared to those of female models, especially famous models. Especially when this male model was not particularly outstanding. Therefore, they couldn't ask for more money. Zihao, why are you in a daze? Long Jie asked. And Zihao thought for a moment before asking, is President Mo here? He's in the audience, what's wrong? Long Jie looked at Zihao suspiciously as he strode towards the audience. At this moment, Mo Ting was sitting in a corner of the audience dressed in a dark blue retro suit. Because of his outstanding appearance and noble aura, even amongst the group of fashion celebrities, he had an irresistible charm. Seeing the calm Mo Ting, Zihao felt he had found Tongning's backing. So, he quickly walked over and whispered a few words in Mo Ting's ear. Mo Ting's gaze was originally cold and unapproachable, but after hearing Zihao's words, his gaze was as sharp as an eagle's. Name your price first and negotiate with him no matter how much it is, Mo Ting replied coldly. As for the debt, we can settle it after the show is over. And Zihao understood Mo Ting's intentions. At a time like this, using money was the best option. But, was it too late to name a price now? Gabby was indeed Lan Shi's backup plan. Even if the South Korean paparazzi returned empty-handed, she was not going to let Tongning get what she wanted. International runway? Did she really think that just because she gave it to you, she was supporting you? Lan Shi looked at the exquisite watch on her wrist and revealed a look of mockery. She wanted Tongning to know, she could send her to the highest place, but she could also pull her down at any time. Just wait and see how our Asian Tongning will embarrass herself on JK's show at London Fashion Week. Time slowly passed. Below the stage, Mo Ting didn't usually pay attention to things like this. But, when it actually happened to Tongning, he couldn't help but feel a little worried. But, no one could understand, the way he occasionally touched his earlobe was a sign that he was nervous. JK's show had already begun. Accompanied by soothing classical music, the opening models walked onto the runway from the left and right. Not long after, Zihao finally returned to Mo Ting's side. He lowered his head in front of Mo Ting, indicating he had completed his task. But, even so, Mo Ting did not have much trust in the Americans. Did you warn Tongning? I'm not sure if Long Jie has found Tongning yet. Mo Ting remained silent for a moment without saying another word. He had already done everything he could. If he continued to put in more effort, it would only affect Tongning's show. I have faith in Tongning. Even if she does come across a problem, she will definitely be able to resolve it. Plus, she has always been wary of Gabby. Mo Ting did not listen to a single word, he did not see a single thing. This troublesome wife of his, it seemed, he really needed to bring her under his banner before he could truly feel at ease. After JK's show was over, Tongning would have her sights set on becoming an international supermodel. According to her abilities, it wouldn't be long before she became a supermodel was just around the corner. Tongning's finale will be the 23rd runway. Mo Ting looked at the entrance of the church and listened to the sound of the camera shutters. He suddenly realized he was so nervous that he actually broke out in a cold sweat. Little Tongning, work harder. You've already overcome so many obstacles, don't fall on the international runway. I don't think you look bad, but how much longer will your confidence and courage stagnate? It didn't take long before the church was filled with a loud round of applause and screams. Mo Ting and Zihao lifted their heads to find Tongning and the British male model, Gabby, had already appeared in front of everyone. Tongning was dressed in a deep V-neck black dress, she looked sexy and devilish. The datura flower on her shoulder looked like it was about to blossom and be reborn. It carried with it a sense of struggle. Beautiful. Too beautiful. This kind of beauty was extremely flamboyant and left a deep impression on one's first glance. It could be said it was unforgettable. She would make the entire venue pale in comparison. However, Mo Ting and Zihao watched nervously as Tongning walked out. Especially as the male model approached her. Chapter 190. Who is this Asian model? Her legs are the most beautiful I have ever seen. She should be awarded first place in the world. Oh my God. Is this an angel acting as the devil? She is stunning and beautiful. Tongning was confident and flamboyant. Especially after stepping onto the runway, she seemed to have changed into a completely different person. It was like she was born for the runway. Because, through her eyes and aura, she revealed the soul of her clothes. The crowd erupted into applause. Many of the foreigners even screamed as they stood up and raised their hands in the air in praise. Meanwhile, the thing that worried Mo Ting and Zihao did not happen. Compared to Tongning, the person that acted unnaturally was Gabby. On stage, Tongning briefly caught sight of Mo Ting's figure. As their eyes met, it was like they had 1,000 things to say, but they didn't need to say them. I won't miss any of your important turns, because I can't let you stand on the stage alone and have no one to cheer you on. Especially if you fail and everyone is waiting to laugh at you. But I will definitely be the one to help you back up. Tongning looked at Mo Ting's almost perfect face and wanted to smile at him. But, because of the clothes she was wearing, all she could do was reveal a flirtatious smile. This caused the crowd below the stage to go crazy. Afterwards, Tongning and Gabby swapped places. This was an opportunity for Gabby to make his move. But just as Mo Ting and Zihao clenched their fists, they realized Gabby had no intention of doing so. He then turned around and walked away. Even though Tongning's figure had disappeared from the backstage, the audience's mind was still filled with images of her for a few minutes. Her aura, her looks, her heaven-defying legs and her flirtatious smile. Above all, the big names in the fashion industry all declared that this Asian model would definitely become famous throughout the world. And they had already found out her name, Tongning. Afterwards, there were so many beautiful clothes that no one had the time to appreciate. But they still wanted to see this Asian model again. It wasn't easy for them to wait for the show to end. The designer led Tongning to the front of the stage as everyone stood up and gave her a thumbs up. However, Tongning's eyes were glued to Mo Ting, who was sitting in the back row. This is your glory. I'm proud of you. Tongning understood his lips as she smiled with tears in her eyes. It wasn't easy for her to resist the urge to run over and hug Mo Ting. At the same time, Lan Shi, who was waiting to see Tongning make a fool of herself, received a photo of Tongning, like a queen, stunning the entire audience. Fashion celebrities that had seen JK's show all gave their comments on Tongning, the purest soul, the best and the walking runway. Afterwards, Lan Shi gave Gabby's manager a phone call and asked why they didn't go according to plan. We agreed in advance that we can't guarantee success, the other party replied in English. Fuck you, foreigner. Lan, she cursed before downing the glass of wine in her hand. This was because Tongning seemed to be her natural nemesis. It was as if the more she tried to stop Tongning, the more Tongning would become. This time, he even became famous after a single battle at JK's show. That was equivalent to being plated with a layer of gold. It was clearly on a different level from the domestic A-grade models. As for her, she was still on the hottest headlines on the internet, being attacked day and night by netizens. After removing her makeup, Tongning accepted an interview from a few media outlets before leaving the church under Nzihao's cover. Mo Ting's car was parked nearby. As soon as he saw Tongning, he immediately picked her up and drove her back to the manor. The reporter from Hua Rong Studio tailed Mo Ting's sports car the entire time. Because the glass was made of a special material, he had no way of getting a photo of the person in front of him. It wasn't until they entered the private manor that the reporter's car was stopped at the entrance that he reluctantly found a place to park his car. He then hid in a corner of the manor, wondering if he would be lucky enough to bump into Tongning. After entering the manor, Mo Ting led Tongning up to the second floor. After pushing open the bedroom door, he pressed Tongning against the wall and kissed her. Tonight, I've been restraining myself. I've been restraining the urge to hug and kiss you. After speaking, Mo Ting removed his suit jacket and threw it on the floor. Tongning leaned against the wall and hooked her arms around Mo Ting's neck. Her fingers dug into Mo Ting's shoulders. She too wanted to keep this man by her side at all times. She wanted to hold him in her embrace. She wanted to see him and kiss him wherever she went. No one knew who ignited the spark, but the couple's lips were naturally pressed together as they absorbed each other's scent. Their battle escalated. Afterwards, the sound of fabric being torn could be heard. Of course, it was Tongning's clothes that were torn. Of course, there were times when she wanted to take the initiative. But this was the moment when a woman's strength was compared to a man's. The couple fell onto the bed as Tongning straddled Mo Ting's body. She wanted to tear his shirt apart, but she needed Mo Ting's help. Tongning was stunned for a moment as she looked at Mo Ting in the dark. She then leaned over and began absorbing his energy and nutrients. Their bodies intertwined, their bodies collided, and their passionate kisses caused the couple to lose control a few times. In fact, Mo Ting almost left marks on Tongning's body. But, in the end, all the energy was concentrated elsewhere, allowing the couple to experience extreme pleasure. After their passionate session, the bedroom was filled with an ambiguous atmosphere. Mo Ting carried Tongning in his arms out of habit as he examined her body. Only after confirming he hadn't left any marks, did he relax. After all, Tongning still had work to do. Tongning rested her head on Mo Ting's abdomen as she faced Mo Ting with her eyes closed. The erosive feeling had already seeped into her bones. Tired? You're more tired, Tongning said with a double meaning. Mo Ting chuckled as he gently stroked Tongning's hair. He then led her to the bathroom to wash up. Tongning lay in the bathtub, enjoying Mo Ting's care as she rested her head on his chest. Did Long Jie find you in the end? Tongning was silent for a moment before she finally responded, but, even if you didn't remind me, I wouldn't have gone easy on Gabby. To prevent him from causing an unmanageable situation during the runway show, I asked Long Jie to tamper with the soles of his shoes. This was also the reason why Gabby looked so unnatural on the runway several times. Compared to giving me a push, he was more worried about his shoes and falling on stage. So, he had to make sure he didn't embarrass himself, so he placed his attention on his shoes. Mo Ting smiled as he placed a kiss on Tongning's forehead. Sure enough, this little woman never disappoints him. But, you probably don't know yet, Lan Shi has decided to remove Nzihao from his position as manager. Chapter 191. Tongning propped herself up and looked at Mo Ting. When did this happen? Long Jie told me that before your show, she overheard Nzihao on the phone with Cheng Tian. Mo Ting stood up from the water, put on a large bathrobe, wrapped Tongning in it and carried her out of the bathroom. Tongning sat on the bed. Her heart was suddenly filled with an indescribable feeling. Although she hadn't spent much time with Nzihao, he had indeed put in a lot of effort for her. Apart from Mo Ting, no one was more suitable to be her manager. In reality, she had already treated An Zihao like a friend. Since he was a friend, if he was hurt, she wouldn't feel good. What are you thinking about? Even if, in the end, Zihao can no longer be my manager, I don't want him to be treated like this by Lan Shi. No anger can compare to being bullied by a slut. Plus, did you think Lan Shi would let Zihao go so easily? I don't want Zihao to leave Cheng Tian from a top manager to a useless person. Tang Ning had reason to believe that Lan Shi was capable of doing something like this. He helped me in the past, so I can't let him end up like this. However, Tang Ning knew deep down that since Lan Shi had already removed An Zihao from his position as manager, it meant, no matter how much she struggled, she was going to lose An Zihao as her manager. Perhaps. An Zihao was well aware of this. Inside the Luofu Hotel, An Zihao listed out all the recent invitations, current contracts and completed work. He then explained to Long Jie what stage Tang Ning was currently at, what she should avoid and how she should use her connections. Long Jie lay on the sofa listening to all this. Her heart was filled with discomfort. An Zihao had already planned out Tang Ning's future path. According to his current progress, in less than half a year, Tang Ning would become a supermodel. She would be on par with Star King's models. I've said so much, did you hear it all? An Zihao asked as he knocked on Long Jie's forehead. Long Jie lifted her head and looked into An Zihao's eyes. She had never thought his eyes were so beautiful, they sparkled like they were glowing. Must you go? Luo Hao said a bunch of nonsense, but there is one thing I can't refute. I am Cheng Tian's manager, so I must follow Lan Shi's arrangements. As An Zihao spoke, his eyes were filled with helplessness and pain. After Yun Xin's passing, An Zihao had never met another person that could ignite his passion for his career. He originally wanted to accompany Tang Ning to the end, but it seemed that was no longer possible. You haven't told Tang Ning about your departure, have you? The new manager is already on her way. After I've briefed you, she will be returning to Beijing. Long Jie took a deep breath as she tugged on the tassels hanging from the sofa. Because Lan Shi's method was as disgusting as swallowing a fly. Can't you just stay? In reality, Long Jie could see the difference between her and An Zihao. He was able to handle all of Tang Ning's invitations and contracts in an orderly manner. He was able to handle all kinds of dinners, interviews, and languages. Most importantly, he was a good person. After hearing Long Jie's words, An Zihao didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Take good care of Tang Ning. After you return to Cheng Tian, President Lan will definitely think of a way to deal with you. I have nothing to be afraid of. After speaking, An Zihao stood up from the sofa and grabbed his jacket and luggage. If you can't handle these things, I'll leave them to President Mo. Long Jie really wanted to hold on to An Zihao, but she didn't know what to do. All she could do was wait for An Zihao to leave before giving Tang Ning a phone call. Hello. Long Jie. Tang Ning, Zihao has left. He is heading to the airport to return to Beijing, Long Jie explained anxiously. Tang Ning sat up in bed. Her originally hazy eyes suddenly became extremely clear. She then gave An Zihao a phone call, but he did not pick up. Tang Ning had no choice but to send An Zihao a message. I won't object to you returning to Beijing today. But, if I find out that you have been humiliated and tortured by Lan Shi, I won't let it go. Also, Lan Shi has no right to step all over you. No one can. After seeing Tang Ning's message, An Zihao let out a gentle laugh. Actually, after seeing Tang Ning say this, he felt everything was worth it to have a friend like her. In reality, he was reluctant. Mo Ting was awoken by Tang Ning's slight movements. He sat up and stared at her in a daze. Knowing she was in a bad mood, he got up and prepared a glass of warm water for her. Ting. I can't stand to see a friend suffer. Mo Ting sat cross-legged on the bed and wrapped his arms around her, comforting her. It's not like you won't see her again. But, Lan Shi definitely won't let it go. After hearing this, Mo Ting placed his arm around Tang Ning's shoulder and said gently, I'm sure he knows what he wants. Even if Lan Shi makes things difficult for him and he can no longer be a manager, he studied directing in the past and has many award-winning works under his belt. Did you think he wouldn't have a way out? I simply hate Lan Shi for suppressing me. That won't happen. As Mo Ting said these words, his obsidian-like eyes contained a deeper meaning between a married couple. Tang Ning immediately understood what he meant. If Lan Shi dared to lay a hand on Zihao, she would definitely be the one to suffer. But, even though Zihao's matter would have a perfect ending, she would no longer have a manager. Plus, she had made a name for herself with the help of JK. Her reputation was currently on the rise and she had a lot of work to do. Was she really going to use the new manager that Lan Shi sent over? It was likely that Lan Shi would send over a piece of trash that would only listen to her. No one could stop Zihao from returning to Beijing. As soon as he entered Chengtian on his own, the staff all pointed and gossiped about him. Not because of anything else, but because the recording of his phone call with Lan Shi was still on the top search engine. Lan Shi turned around from her office chair and threw a slap across Zihao's face. Do you know why I hit you? Do you know how much criticism you've caused Chengtian Entertainment to suffer? Lan Shi questioned sharply, and Zihao did not refute, nor did he retaliate. He no longer had any feelings towards Lan Shi. Anger, hatred, and everything else were all buried deep in his heart. He was ready to seal them away. I don't care what you do, go and explain yourself. Otherwise, Zihao, don't blame me for doing something even worse to you. For example. And Zihao asked in a mocking tone. If you cause the company to suffer a loss, then it will be your fault. Do you want to lose everything before leaving? Or, do you want me to expose the fact that Yun Xin was a kept woman before she became famous? Chapter 192. After hearing this, Zihao's eyes grew wide and filled with anger. He grabbed Lan Shi and asked through gritted teeth, Yun Xin has already passed away. How could you be so ruthless that you wouldn't even let a dead person go? If you can't even care about the living, how could you care about the dead? Lan Shi scoffed as her eyes became misty. And Zihao, we have been friends for many years, we are friends. Yet, you are helping Tang Ning? What benefits did Tang Ning give you? Is it worth it for you to throw away our friendship for so many years? Tang Ning has never given me any benefits. Unlike you, she doesn't give me fame and money. But, Lan Shi, in front of Tang Ning, I feel like I am living a normal life. At least, she isn't like you, constantly threatening me. After speaking, Zihao loosened his grip and sneered, so, don't mention the word friend to me, it makes me feel disgusted. After being pushed away, Lan Shi felt a heavy blow to her heart. I may make you feel disgusted, but don't you think about how difficult my life is? Tang Ning's life is much more difficult than yours. At least, you haven't come across a boss more vicious than you, but she has. And Zihao saw Lan Shi did not respond, so he decided not to continue arguing with her. I can resign and leave Chengtian, but if you want me to help you clear the headlines, that is impossible. If you want to see Yun Xin being scolded by the netizens after her death, you can give it a try. And Zihao looked at Lan Shi and stared at her. It wasn't easy for him to resist the urge to hit her. In the end, he nodded his head. Okay, I'll fulfill your wish. What do you want me to do? Hold a press conference to clarify that this incident had nothing to do with me and that you were the one who created this recording. And Zihao looked at Lan Shi's back helplessly. Didn't she want him to leave Chengtian with his reputation in tatters? Since he had already gotten to this point, what difference did it make whether he took the blame or not? I promise, and Zihao replied straightforwardly. But, before he turned to leave, he added, you better not regret this. Lan Shi did not turn around. She maintained her pride as a CEO as she scoffed mockingly. She already had Yun Xin's weakness in her hands. What else could Zihao do? After Zihao left the office, he did not tell anyone about his conversation with Lan Shi. He simply headed to Yun Xin's grave on his own and sat in front of her tombstone for an entire day. Yun Xin, why didn't you take me with you back then? At this moment, it was already nighttime in the UK. Tang Ning had not received any news regarding Zihao and was extremely anxious. It seemed, there was nothing Lu Che could do to help with Cheng Tian's family matters. Above all, Hai Rui already had enough to deal with. After Zihao left, although Long Jie was busy as usual, there were some things that required a lot of effort. Especially when it came to English, There were a lot of technical terms that she couldn't understand. Tongning. Let me see. Tongning picked up the laptop in her hands and looked at the comments Zihao had already made. This is an invalid contract, it has already been rejected. Why didn't you say so earlier? I even spent a few hours translating it. After dealing with Hai Rui's matters, Mo Ting came out of the study room. Seeing the worried expressions on the two women's faces, he casually took the laptop from Tongning's hands. But Tongning was afraid he would be like this, so her mood became even worse. After Mo Ting finished looking through all of Tongning's emails, he placed the tasks that she needed to complete at the top of his list. Because of JK's success, Tongning might need to stay in the UK for a period of time. She had received a few more master-level runway offers. Ting, I want to return to Beijing, Tongning asked for Mo Ting's opinion. Mo Ting knew she was worried about her friend. Before Zihao's matter was resolved, there was no way she could calm down and work. So, he nodded his head calmly. I'll get someone to book you a plane ticket and help you postpone your work until 2 days later. Tongning gently nodded her head as her heart skipped a beat. She knew, no matter what, Mo Ting would always stand by her side and support her every decision. At this time, the new manager sent by Lan Shi gave Long Jie a phone call. Long Jie reluctantly picked up the phone. In the end, the manager was even angrier than she was as she scolded, as an assistant, what are you trying to do by not letting a model stay in the room arranged by the agency? Where are you right now? It's already the middle of the night, why haven't you returned to the hotel? Are you crazy? Thinking about it, the manager must have gone to the hotel empty-handed. Long Jie wanted to refute, but she realized she couldn't say a word. All she could do was stare at Tongning in a daze, speechless. Are you mute? Who told you to speak? Tongning suddenly snatched the phone out of Long Jie's hands and said, You have been fired. Who are you? How dare you fire me? Tongning. The manager thought it was Long Jie, so as soon as she heard Tongning's name, her attitude changed as she spoke in a flattering tone. I'm sorry Ning Jie, I couldn't find you guys, so I got a little anxious. I'm sorry, you just happened to insult my assistant, so I'd like to ask you to not appear in front of me. If Lan Shi asks, you can answer her that even if a bag of trash is disguised as a manager, she is still trash. After speaking, Tongning hung up the phone and handed it back to Long Jie. This time, Tongning and the other two set off that very night. With the addition of JK's popularity, Tongning was even more careful than before. So as the sports car drove out of the manor, the reporter from Hua Rong Studio did not manage to get a clear photo. In fact, he couldn't even get a clear shot of the back of the car. It wasn't until she boarded the plane that Tongning found out Luo Hao had released news about her and a male model in Beijing. It turned out, something like this had actually happened. Everyone had been hiding it from her. Mo Ting had even spent a fortune to keep Lan Shi on the hottest search rankings. There's no need to do this really. I can't stand by and watch you suffer like this. Mo Ting replied in seriousness as he hugged her. Tongning had nothing to say. She simply held onto Mo Ting's hand and gently placed a kiss on the back of it. The reporter from Hua Rong Studio had once again missed his chance to take photos. But, did that mean he wouldn't be able to get a photo? After almost 10 hours of flight time, Tongning and Long Jie quietly stepped out of the airport. Not long after, they saw a video announcement. Chengtian Entertainments and Zihao was about to hold a press conference. Tongning knew Lan Shi wanted Zihao to be the scapegoat. Because, she had endured this feeling before. But, Lan Shi never expected she, Tongning, would return. Chapter 193. If Zihao admitted that he fabricated the recording, it would mean that the truth about Tongning's innocence could be overturned. In other words, Zihao's actions were a little suspicious. He was trying to cover up the truth. He was trying to cover up Tongning's messy private life and the fact that she was involved with multiple men. In reality, this was a difficult problem for Zihao. In this decision, he didn't care if he got hurt, but he didn't want to hurt a dead lover and a living friend. Tongning quietly returned to Beijing and contacted all her friends that could help her. It wasn't that she was afraid of fighting with Lan Shi, she simply wanted to help Zihao find the best way out. Tongning, I think you are being overly worried about Zihao. He is, after all, a top manager and has his own way of dealing with things. He won't just sit there and wait to be threatened by Lan Shi. Long Jie tried to comfort Tongning on the way to Chengtian. What can you change by going to Chengtian? I'm not going to look for Lan Shi, Tongning replied calmly. I'm going to wait for Zihao. Do you have a better way to contact him right now? Long Jie shook her head. Zihao had never picked up any phone calls or contacted anyone. Since he was going to hold a press conference in the lobby of Chengtian, he would definitely be there early. Wait, Long Jie, can you ask around for the location of Yunshin's grave? Long Jie nodded her head. She was quite good at asking around for information. A moment later, she told Lu Che that they were heading straight to the grave. After picking them up from the airport, Lu Che was assigned by Mo Ting to be Tongning and Long Jie's chauffeur. As soon as the two met, they looked at each other awkwardly. Long Jie had previously suggested living together. Although Lu Che didn't understand in the end. Long Jie's heart was in turmoil. Especially now that Lu Che was using his identity as her fiancé to act as their chauffeur, the awkwardness in her heart once again multiplied. As it was a cloudy and foggy day, Tongning wrapped herself in a trench coat and entered the grave. As expected, she found Zihao standing in front of Yunshin's grave. As their eyes met, Zihao was a little surprised as he quickly stood up. Why are you back? I still have a lot of work to do in London. You know I have a lot of work, so why did you leave so quickly? Tongning glared at Zihao before placing the bouquet of white roses she bought at the entrance of the cemetery in front of Yunshin's tombstone. Looking at the young and beautiful figure on the tombstone, Tongning couldn't help but place her hands together as a sign of respect towards the deceased. You've heard about what happened this afternoon. Yes. I suddenly understand why Mo Ting always says the same thing to me. You obviously have a perfect plan. Why do you always choose a path that hurts you? Now, I can understand how he feels because I also want to ask you the same question. Did you come back because you didn't want to be implicated, or do you think I'm still afraid of Lan Shi? I simply don't want my friend to experience the pain that I once experienced. Tongning, have you ever felt despair? Zihao lowered his head and reached out to touch the portrait on the stone tablet. Even though his lover had been gone for so many years, he still couldn't let go. Of course. 3 months ago, on the eve of our wedding, I discovered my fiancé cheating on me with another woman in front of my bed. But, the next day, I picked Mo Ting up at the Civil Affairs office. Tongning replied. But, even without Mo Ting, I wouldn't have given up on my right to love. Why should I? But, I'm glad I met Mo Ting. Giving my love to him is worth it. Don't you think it's hard? Thinking about one person year after year and living the same life, that's what I call hard. After speaking, Tongning pulled out a business card from her handbag. I know you don't need any of these things, but I simply want to say, I'm giving you a chance to start afresh. At the press conference this afternoon, no matter what decision you make, I will support you. But, Lan Shi, she better not give me a chance to retaliate. If she does, I will definitely tear her apart. After speaking, Tongning turned and left the cemetery, leaving Zihao alone in front of the tombstone to think. Tongning had said that even if she had been in despair, she would never give up on loving him. Zihao thought about this sentence over and over again. Suddenly, he felt like everything else wasn't as important anymore. So, he smiled as he looked down at the portrait on the tombstone and said, Yunshin, perhaps I've really sealed myself away for too long. Of course, a dead person's reputation was important, but it was all in the past. A living person was more important. 3 days after the press conference, Chengtian Entertainment's lobby was already filled with reporters. Zihao had something to say about Chengtian's recent scandal. On the eve of the press conference, Lan Shi stood to one side and chatted with Luo Hao as she watched the staff prepare the venue. You should be careful of Zihao. He is, after all, a top manager. Back when the three of us were still together, he was always like this. On the surface, he seemed nonchalant, but in reality, he had already taken care of everything behind the scenes. He didn't need anyone to worry about him. Lan Shi crossed her arms as she turned to look at Luo Hao and scoffed, but, no matter how strong he is, he still has one weakness he can't get rid of, Yunxin. For the sake of Yunxin, there's nothing he wouldn't do. Did you think he would betray his true love for Tongning? Lan Shi's confidence had always come from the bottom of her heart. But Luo Hao never had high hopes for her. Lan Shi's arrogance often made her neglect a lot of things. Change. Nothing lasts forever, and people change. But Luo Hao did not say a word because Lan Shi wouldn't listen. Only after suffering would she understand the power of change. 3:15 p.m. And Zihao walked into Cheng Tian dressed in a grey suit. He approached Lan Shi and Luo Hao first and said to Lan Shi, "Don't forget what you promised me." Lan Shi smiled and nodded, "I will return all the information to you." Hearing this, and Zihao looked at Luo Hao with an inquisitive gaze, "Out of the three of us, in the end, you still have the last laugh." Luo Hao lifted his chin and simply said, "The person I want to deal with is Tongning. If you want to blame someone, blame yourself for standing on the wrong side. If you can't find a job in the future, you can let me know." And Zihao let out a gentle laugh. All of a sudden, it had been a long time since Lan Shi had seen this kind of clean smile where he let go of everything. She simply felt the Zihao at this moment was a little different. However, before she had time to think back, Zihao had already disappeared from their line of sight and headed towards the stage. Did they want him to admit to faking the recording? The show was about to begin. Chapter 194. Amidst the snapping sounds of camera shutters, Zihao calmly faced the media. The corners of his lips gently curved upwards as he looked at them with an ambiguous smile. The last time he faced such a grand scene was many years ago when Yunxin accepted the VL Global Spokesperson Award. Today, he was doing this for himself, so he could be reborn. The time was 3:20 p.m. The press conference officially began. Cheng Tian's staff maintained order as they were given 15 minutes for the media to ask questions. Afterwards, Lan Shi walked onto the stage and scanned her eyes across the room. She then spoke, "Friends from the media, you have all worked hard. In response to the recent headlines and the false information that Cheng Tian has released, we will give everyone a complete explanation. The reason why Cheng Tian has gotten to where it is today is because of our abilities and hard work. However, recently, due to a certain reason, one of our models has been mysteriously suppressed. Now, I have been dragged into this mess for no reason. From the start, I have not stepped out to make a statement. Because I believe in justice and I also believe that evil will eventually come to an end." As Lan Shi spoke, Zihao was standing beside her. For a moment, he really wanted to ask Lan Shi, how could she have the nerve to say something like this? "Don't you feel humiliated at all?" Because of Lan Shi's words, she had unintentionally pushed all of Cheng Tian's troubles onto Tongning. She was obviously trying to tell everyone that Cheng Tian had been developing steadily, but because of Tongning's appearance, Cheng Tian had been dragged into a whirlpool of troubles. Next, we would like to invite our top manager, Mr. Zihao, to give an explanation. I'm sure he will be able to give everyone a satisfactory answer regarding the recording of the recent headlines. After speaking, Lan Shi took a step back. However, at this time, one of the media asked a question. "President Lan, I think I understand what you are trying to say. Are you implying that the reason Cheng Tian is in so much trouble is because of the model that you recently signed, Tongning?" Her words were suddenly pointed out. Everyone looked at the reporter and the stunned Lan Shi. Originally, he thought she would at least say a few words and let the situation continue to be ambiguous. After all, Tongning was a newly signed model and they had previously acted like they were welcoming a superstar. If they were to suddenly tear each other apart, wouldn't the scene be a little too ugly? However, Lan Shi did not explain or say anything. She simply smiled mysteriously. Everyone understood what he meant, so why did he have to make it so obvious? Afterwards, Lan Shi turned her dark gaze towards Zihao. Because, apart from getting rid of Zihao, Lan Shi's main goal today was to attack Tongning. Taking advantage of the fact that Tongning was still overseas and had no way to retaliate, she wanted to catch her off guard. Don't think that just because you successfully walked JK's show, you would be able to soar into the sky. No, There was no such thing as a bargain in this world. From Lan Shi's reaction, the media had already guessed the purpose of today's press conference. It was obvious, they wanted to destroy Tongning. The industry had already sensed an internal conflict in Cheng Tian. So, today, no matter what Lan Shi said, she was going to slander Tongning. Zihao. Lan Shi reminded Zihao. Her voice was deep and threatening. After hearing this, Zihao nodded his head before he turned back to face the media. Today, I want to give everyone an explanation. Regarding the recording on the headlines, the truth is. Before I reveal this secret, let me say something else. Just as Zihao got to the crux of the matter, he suddenly changed the topic and smiled at everyone. I've been in this industry for so many years. I've gone from being a nameless assistant to where I am today. I can't even remember how many times I've stood on a stage like this. I want to say something that even makes me feel disgusted. Before I tell everyone the truth, I want to mention someone that everyone has already forgotten, Yun Xin. The media looked at each other, unsure why Zihao would suddenly mention Yun Xin's name. Of course, the person with the worst expression was Lan Shi. She suddenly realized, Zihao was uncontrollable and made her feel uneasy. As everyone knows, Yun Xin died in a car accident. That day, we had a huge argument. Yun Xin drove over the speed limit and crashed into a guardrail, killing one and injuring the other. At that time, Cheng Tian kept the information under wraps. I was naive enough to think they were doing it for my own good. But, today, I finally understand, the reason they kept the information under wraps was because they had a guilty conscience. Zihao, do you know what you're saying? Lan Shi suddenly asked as she grabbed onto Zihao's arm. Zihao let out a gentle laugh as he asked in a low voice, "Didn't you want me to reveal the truth? I will do as you wish, don't worry." After speaking, he freed himself from Lan Shi's grip and continued to explain, because Cheng Tian Entertainment single-handedly caused Yun Xin's death. First, it was our beloved President Lan who hid in the dark and spied on Yun Xin and I. Then, it was my two good friends, Yong Jing and Luo Hao, who leaked the information to the media. In the end, she got into a car accident. Isn't it very exciting? The reporters obviously didn't expect Zihao to say something like this. They didn't expect him to suddenly reveal something that had happened many years ago. Lan Shi suddenly understood why Zihao had appeared on stage today. She immediately gestured for Luo Hao to find someone to escort him off the stage. However, Zihao continued to speak. Do you know what the reason is? It's because of jealousy. Cheng Tian's CEO is jealous of the models under her management, so she has thought of many ways to control them. Yun Xin from many years ago was one, and Tongning, who is currently gaining momentum, is another. The incident with Yun Xin has been in the past for too long, so long that I've already forgotten about her methods. But, Tongning, that recording is the best proof. Because, it is the real thing. I still have the original recording on my phone. Luo Hao and his bodyguards stepped onto the stage to forcefully escort Zihao out of the venue. In fact, they even resorted to violence by using force in front of the media. Although Zihao wasn't easily injured. Luo Hao added more people. Lan Shi pretended to be calm and was about to announce the end of the press conference, but, just as everyone was nervously watching the scene unfold before their eyes, a tall figure appeared at the entrance of Cheng Tian. She was originally supposed to be in London. I'm sure everyone has heard that all of Tongning's resources were taken over by Li Danny and Hua Yuan. However, Tongning continued to rely on her own outstanding performance in LM to regain everyone's recognition. Following on was Tongning's interview on Feng Cai. In order to stop Tongning, Lan Shi actually kidnapped Tongning's assistant, Longman's grandfather. So that's how Tongning publicly announced that she wanted him back. Finally, there was the JK stalking incident. You can't imagine that the CEO of a company would actually hire a paparazzi and a male model to put on a show to slander her own model's innocence. Above is everything that Lan Shi has done to Tongning since she became a signed model. As her manager, I have seen everything with my own eyes. I know exactly what she has done. As soon as Enzihao's words left his mouth, the reporters were in an uproar. Chengtian Entertainment had never experienced such a frightening scandal. Who would have thought their internal strife would be so fierce and there would be so many undercurrents brewing behind the scenes? Lan Shi looked at the uncontrollable situation and suddenly, she took a few steps back. All of these incidents had traces that could be traced back to. There was nothing she could say to refute, it wouldn't be able to withstand any digging. No one expected Enzihao would throw caution to the wind and reveal everything. So, Lan Shi held back her anger and said to Enzihao, "Do you not want to stay in the industry anymore? Enzihao, are you tired of living? Did you think I would care about something like this?" Enzihao asked coldly. "From the moment you plotted to kill Yun Xin, from the moment you plotted to hurt Tongning, I already thought to myself, Lan Shi, one day, I will make you pay the price. The industry? Do you think I care about that?" Lan Shi glared at Enzihao with hatred. Her eyes were red as tears rolled down her cheeks. At this time, the media was also in an uproar. Oh my god, if what Enzihao said is the truth, then Lan Shi and Chengtian Entertainment are too scary. Isn't that right? Murder and kidnapping. I always thought Chengtian Entertainment, a second-rate agency in the modeling industry, wouldn't be so dirty. It turns out, I was too inexperienced. I don't dare to talk about what happened to Yun Xin, but I've heard quite a bit about what happened to Tongning. The industry has been saying that Tongning is being suppressed, but Tongning isn't as easy to bully as Yun Xin. None of this is true. Lan Shi heard the ridicule and discussion from the media and suddenly yelled, "Enzihao, you've said so much, but do you really have any evidence? If you don't have any, then you will pay a heavy price for slandering me today. I know, everything that happened today was planned by you and Tongning. You did it all to bring me down." Everyone looked at Lan Shi like they were watching a good show. Compared to everything Enzihao had said, Lan Shi's words were obviously an excuse and an attempt to frame him. "Lan Shi, do you really want evidence?" Enzihao looked at Lan Shi through the bodyguards with a look of mockery and sadness. Lan Shi was speechless. All of a sudden, she was speechless. If she said she really wanted evidence, then millions of netizens would take the initiative to search for it for Enzihao. When that time came, she would be beyond redemption. "Did you know? How much I hoped that you had nothing to do with Yun Xin. How much I hoped that you had simply lost your mind for a moment. But seeing how much you tried to slander Tongning, I realized I could no longer remain silent. Tongning simply wants to be a good model. She has never wanted to go against you. But, you have repeatedly hurt her and hurt the people around her. You are even willing to sacrifice me to achieve your goal. So, I hereby announce, I am leaving Chengtian Entertainment." Chapter 196. Enzihao is quitting. A company like this, of course she is quitting. Is she waiting to die? What will happen to Tongning if Enzihao quits? Tongning is still a model for Chengtian. Hearing Enzihao was quitting, the media began to whisper amongst themselves. Actually, this was understandable because Enzihao had already exposed all of Chengtian's secrets. Regardless of whether these things were the truth or not, for Chengtian, it was bound to be a huge blow. Because, no matter what Enzihao said, it would become a stain on Chengtian Entertainment that could never be erased. Their opponents would continue to dig up information until Lan Shi was completely destroyed. Since Enzihao and Lan Shi had already fallen out to such an extent, there was no way they could continue working together. "Enzihao, did you think, after leaving Chengtian, anyone would still want you? You disregarded the company's interests and exposed our secrets. Did you think you could continue to survive in this industry?" Lan Shi questioned angrily. Her voice was sharp and trembling. It was harsh and unpleasant to the ears. "No one will want you, no one." Lan Shi yelled at Enzihao through the bodyguards. "But, so what?" Enzihao's expression had never been so calm before. The struggle and pain of the past was finally over. So, Enzihao simply smiled and said to Lan Shi, "Since I've decided to quit Chengtian Entertainment, I've never expected to be a manager again. Lan Shi, you've spent your entire life trying to control other people's lives. Yet, You've failed to control anyone. In the end, you've even thrown yourself away. And Zihao's voice was gentle and steady. Because, from the moment he announced he was quitting Cheng Tian Entertainment, he had already begun his new life. In the end, Zihao turned to face the media once again and bowed deeply. He then looked at Tongning and said, "Tongning is truly a great woman. At least, to me, she is great enough. She is someone that can hold on to her own identity and remain true to herself despite being in the busy industry. She can never be the crazy woman that Lan Shi and the paparazzi are talking about." Tongning loves to walk on the runway because she understands it is her destiny. Originally, she wanted to use Cheng Tian as a platform to fulfill her dreams, but now, all she has received is endless pain from Lan Shi. Towards Lan Shi, I really have nothing to say. I only have one thing to ask everyone. Cheng Tian has hurt Tongning more than it has helped her. This is the truth. From now on, whenever Cheng Tian reports something related to Tongning, I hope everyone does not believe it and cannot believe it. Finally, Zihao looked at Tongning and asked, "What's your choice?" She had mentioned before that she was simply here to help a friend. "So," she replied, "I still need to return to London. Can't you hurry up?" The reporters below the stage burst into laughter as they discovered Tongning's attitude. She was indeed a person that didn't like to cause trouble. If she had something to say, she would do it. At a time like this, she did not even think about stepping on Lan Shi. It was clear to see that her magnanimity was indeed worthy of respect. In such a situation, she was actually able to stay out of it completely. It could be seen that she really wanted others to ignore her existence. At this moment, all she wanted to do was help Zihao find himself. As for the debt between her and Lan Shi, there was still time to settle. "Zihao, you can't leave. You are breaching the contract. Don't forget, your penalty is 3 times the original amount." Lan Shi's arrogance made her think that after Zihao left Cheng Tian, he would be completely smelly and would no longer be able to survive in the industry. Perhaps, Zihao could no longer be anyone's manager. But, that didn't mean Zihao's life was over. Zihao did not say a word. Not long after, a few men dressed in black entered Cheng Tian's lobby. They were a few stylishly dressed foreign men. From the looks of their bodies, they were probably bodyguards. Afterwards, a slightly chubby middle-aged man approached the 4 bodyguards and said to Lan Shi with a big smile, "Actually, President Lan, I really want to thank you. Zihao is my proudest student. I have long wanted him to go to the US to develop his career. He has a talent for drama, so I want him to become a director in the US and enter Hollywood in the future. As for your modeling agency, you can have fun on your own." So, this was Zihao's decision. Tongning finally let out a sigh of relief. "Hey, do you guys recognize who he is?" A sharp-eyed reporter immediately recognized the middle-aged man and let out a scream. "It's the famous director, Zhu Huanshan. I never thought, not only did Zihao do well as a manager, he also has other talents. Hasn't Cheng Tian Entertainment lost a lot of face this time?" Lan Shi originally thought Zihao would starve to death after leaving. In the end, he caught the eye of a famous director and was snatched away by him. What a great slap to the face. I really hope there is a better agency that can snatch Tongning away too. Hai Rui Entertainment. Mo Ting was sitting in his office looking at the entertainment news. Seeing that Tongning had actually gone to act as a human wall, he couldn't help but reveal a subtle smile. The internet was already in an uproar as people started leaving comments on Tongning's fan club, telling her to quickly find a new agency. She couldn't continue working with Cheng Tian Entertainment. But, Tongning actually felt this was the best time to work with them. With Lan Shi's every move being monitored, the restrictions placed on her would be a lot looser. Mo Ting understood what Tongning was thinking, but it didn't stop him from rejoicing. Even though Tongning didn't leave Cheng Tian with Zihao, it didn't mean she didn't have any plans. Especially when the reporter couldn't help but say that he hoped Tongning would find a better agency. In reality, Mo Ting already had a plan in mind. Of course, this didn't stop Mo Ting from being happy for Zihao. Although he could no longer be a manager, he believed Zihao entering a new field was a new beginning. Perhaps they would have a chance to work together again in the future. Most importantly, the task of helping Tang Ning look over her contract had once again returned to him. Tang Ning was always worried that he would get tired, but this would soon become normal. The lobby of Cheng Tian Entertainment was already in a mess. Especially as An Zihao and Tang Ning prepared to leave Cheng Tian. Luo Hao watched as the two left under the watchful eyes of the media. But, in his eyes, Tang Ning and An Zihao were stepping over Lan Shi's flesh and blood as they walked out the door. Did they think they could leave just like that? How could it be that easy? Everyone had forgotten about the artist's director standing in the corner. He was the most terrifying person in Cheng Tian. Chapter 197. Tang Ning, although I can no longer be your manager, the time I've spent as your manager has been an unforgettable experience. I am very happy and very lucky. As they left Cheng Tian, An Zihao stretched out his hand towards Tang Ning and waved it, gesturing for her to shake it. Tang Ning let out a gentle laugh as she held onto An Zihao's hand and tilted her head. To be honest, you are indeed an outstanding manager. If it wasn't for Lan Shi's scheme, I would never have let you go. An Zihao let go of Tang Ning's hand. For a moment, he was still unwilling to give up. I once thought I could accompany you to the end. At least, I thought I could help you become a supermodel. But, it doesn't matter. Even if I don't take this position, there are plenty of people who are willing. Aren't you aware? You have a wife-slave at home. I am also a wife-slave, okay? Tang Ning retorted unwillingly. I will continue to pay attention to you. If you have any difficulties, give me a call. If one day you decide you don't want to be a model anymore and want to be an actress, you can come look for me. Perhaps, that day will come. Tang Ning felt nothing was impossible. Okay, I need to go. Tang Ning, I know you didn't say anything today because you didn't want Lan Shi to come back and beg you. After all, you said you would make her kneel before you. But, you need to pay attention to Luo Hao. He is more patient than Yongjing and Lan Shi. Tang Ning smiled mysteriously. Of course, she wasn't Lan Shi. She was able to keep her guard up. So, An Zihao had nothing to worry about. After all, she still had Mo Ting by her side. Hurry up and go. I still need to go back and accompany my wife-slave. An Zihao's lips curved upwards as he gently hugged Tang Ning. Finally, under Tang Ning and Long Jie's blessings, he set off again. In reality, An Zihao had a feeling that even if Lan Shi hadn't set him up, he wouldn't have been able to watch Tang Ning walk down the path of a supermodel. Because, there was someone else that was more than willing to do it. And, the good Tang Ning deserved the best treatment. Let's go, Tang Ning. It's time for us to head to the airport. Long Jie reminded Tang Ning that her work in London was not over yet. They had already applied for time off, so they couldn't keep the photographers and models waiting for her. I want to go see Mo Ting. Do you miss him? Long Jie winked at Tang Ning. Tang Ning nodded her head without hiding anything. Let's go. Long Jie happily agreed as she drove Tang Ning to Hai Rui Entertainment. However, along the way, all she heard on the radio was about Cheng Tian's press conference. The discussions repeatedly revolved around her, Lan Shi and An Zihao. In fact, the discussions were all one-sided. This time, Lan Shi was in big trouble. Today's press conference was a great way to vent our anger. Otherwise, who knows how much more dirty water Lan Shi would have thrown at us. Tang Ning thought about how Lan Shi was already on the verge of collapsing as they left the venue. Her expression naturally turned cold. A person like Lan Shi would never admit that she was wrong. She simply believed that she had lost to timing and luck. Where is Lan Shi now? Haha, you don't know? After we left, the reporters surrounded Lan Shi. In the end, there was a small accident and Lan Shi was hit by a camera. She is now in the hospital. Long Jie laughed. So, are you still angry? Tang Ning suddenly asked Long Jie. It sounded a little strange, but, after a short pause, Long Jie came to her senses. She understood Tang Ning was doing this to avenge her for kneeling to Hai Yi. I haven't been angry for a long time. Who am I? Do you think a person that has nothing to do with me is worth my anger? Tang Ning lifted her head and glanced at Long Jie. She knew Long Jie was naturally optimistic, so she did not say anything else. As long as Long Jie could make it to the hospital, she would feel better. But, thinking about Lu Chei's injured knee, Tang Ning couldn't help but remind, when you pass by a pharmacy, buy some medicine for Lu Chei. That day, when he came to deliver your passport, he injured his knee. What? Long Jie was a little nervous as she quickly stepped on the brakes. Tang Ning glared at her as she restarted the car. In that case, I'll look for a pharmacy nearby. Tang Ning did not say a word. She looked at Long Jie as if to say, do as you see fit. Long Jie smiled awkwardly. She realized her reaction was a little too extreme. Originally, the atmosphere was relaxed and carefree. However, an anxious voice suddenly came from the radio. Host, can you help me contact Tang Ning? I need to talk to her, it's urgent. Not only Tang Ning, even the host thought it was a fan, so he comforted, I'm sorry, miss, a program like ours can't possibly invite Tang Ning. But, I'm really in a hurry. She promised to save my life. Hearing this, the host was confused. He thought it was a crazy fan, so he disconnected the line and tried to ease the atmosphere before contacting the next listener. Of course, Tang Ning did not take the matter to heart. After all, she had a lot of fans and there were also a lot of fans that would share stories with her. Sometimes, it was impossible to tell the truth from the lies. After a 40-minute car ride, Long Jie escorted Tang Ning to Hai Rui. At the same time, Long Jie anxiously followed behind Tang Ning with some medicine. Inside the elevator, Lu Chei looked at Tang Ning in surprise as she stepped out of the elevator. Madam, why haven't you left yet? Isn't your flight at 4:30 p.m.? Where's Mo Ting? He's in the waiting room. Lu Chei was holding some medicine in his hand when he realized he was going to hide it. But, Tang Ning had already seen it. Is Mo Ting not feeling well? Tang Ning immediately furrowed her brows as she looked at him anxiously. Actually, it's not a big problem. He just gets a migraine from time to time. Why has he never mentioned it at home? Why does it rarely hurt? In that case, he definitely didn't tell you. As you know, he can't bear to do things like that. Lu Chei laughed as he handed the tray to Tang Ning. In that case, I'll leave this to the madam. At this moment, Tang Ning had no other thoughts in her mind. She ran straight to the waiting room. Meanwhile, Long Jie and Lu Chei, who were left behind, looked at each other awkwardly. Long Jie turned her face away and pretended to look at the rainbow in the sky. However, she still threw the medicine in her hand at Lu Chei. Lu Chei was confused. What is this? Didn't you hurt your knee? Lu Chei continued to unpack the medicine. Looking at the medicine inside, he realized it didn't only contain medicine for external injuries, there were also medicines for colds, fevers, headaches and fever, as well as rheumatism. I accidentally bought too much. Take it as a reward for taking care of Tang Ning. But, the big miss, who thanked someone by treating them to medicine? Inside the waiting room, a figure was lying quietly on the black bed. He no longer had the majestic presence of a king. Instead, he was holding his head in his hands from the pain. Ting! Tang Ning hurried over. Chapter 198. Under the dim lighting, Mo Ting heard this familiar voice. He resisted the pain in his head and calmed his expression. He turned around and looked at Tang Ning. Shouldn't we board the plane? Perhaps, Mo Ting couldn't tell, but Tang Ning could hear every change in his voice. It was the pain he was suppressing. Tang Ning's throat felt like it was on fire. She was afraid that her words would sound like she was about to cry, so she put down the medicine in her hands and sat on the headboard. She then struggled to help Mo Ting's body up and pulled him into her embrace, wrapping her arms tightly around him. Take the medicine first. Mo Ting's attention was distracted and he began to panic, especially when Tang Ning's tears landed on his shoulder. He quickly turned around, but Tang Ning held him back. Take your medicine. Mo Ting did not continue to struggle. He simply took the medicine and water. Tang Ning watched as he swallowed the medicine. She reached out her arms and hugged his head, gently rubbing it as she placed her lips against his hair. Mo Ting closed his eyes. At this time, he no longer had the energy to explain. After resting for half an hour, the medicine finally took effect and Mo Ting gradually recovered. He struggled out of Tong Ning's embrace and turned to look at her. Tong Ning's eyes were still filled with tears as she looked at Mo Ting without saying a word. It only hurts occasionally, it's not that serious. I just had a checkup not long ago, I don't know. Tong Ning lowered her head as her tears fell onto Mo Ting's arm. Seeing you in so much pain made me anxious. I don't know what else I can do for you. Tong Ning wasn't a person that liked to cry. Whenever she came across a problem, she would face it calmly. Only when it came to Mo Ting, would she react so strongly. Mo Ting pulled her into his embrace and hugged her tightly. His hand ran down her back as he comforted her. I'll lose my mind if I see you in pain. Hearing this, Mo Ting suddenly came to a realization. It turned out, keeping himself healthy was also a way to protect Tong Ning. After all, Tong Ning's tears didn't land on the back of his hand. Instead, they landed on his heart like a hammer. Mo Ting hugged her and waited for her to calm down. After quite some time, he finally said in a hoarse voice beside her ear, later, I'll ask Lu Che to arrange for you to go to the hospital for a checkup. Tong Ning did not say a word. She simply bit down hard on Mo Ting's neck. Mo Ting was already used to her venting in this way. As long as he caused her emotions to fluctuate, whether it was excitement or anger, she would respond in this way. Tong Ning bit down on the thin layer of skin, refusing to let go. Mo Ting let her do as she pleased. He smiled and hugged her tightly. It's okay, I feel a lot better after taking the medicine. Tong Ning finally let out a sigh of relief. Her heart ached again. Mo Ting turned his head and looked at the alarm clock on the bedside table. He quickly said to Tong Ning, I'll take you to the airport, otherwise, it'll be too late. Tong Ning still didn't want to get up, but Mo Ting carried her off the bed. After tidying up a little, he led her out of the waiting room. Inside the office, Long Jie and Lu Che were still awkwardly staring at each other. As soon as they saw Tong Ning being carried out of the office, Long Jie immediately ran over. What's wrong? What happened? Wasn't Big Boss sick? How did Tong Ning end up being the weak one? I'll take you to the airport now. Long Jie, take good care of Tong Ning. Long Jie didn't understand the situation in front of her, so all she could do was respond blankly. The group quickly boarded the car, but Tong Ning remained quiet the entire way. Mo Ting could tell she hadn't recovered from her earlier emotions. So, as they waited at a red light, he reached out his hand and patted her long hair to comfort her. Soon, they arrived at the airport. To avoid being discovered by the media, Mo Ting parked the car in a secluded spot and gestured for Long Jie to come over immediately. Long Jie received Big Boss's signal and immediately got out of the car. She then pulled Tong Ning out. Our work in London will end in 2 to 3 days. We can't drag it out any longer. Tong Ning did not say a word. Her expression was calm. As she stepped out of the car, she did not look at Mo Ting's expression. It seemed, she was afraid she would regret it. However, as soon as they stepped into the airport, Tong Ning suddenly asked, Long Jie, I'm still worried. What should I do? Long Jie reacted for a moment. She was a little surprised, but she quickly smiled. Tong Ning, you know better than I do. When a person is hesitating and doesn't choose the outcome they want, they will often regret it. For example, when the weather is about to change before you leave and you are hesitating to bring an umbrella, if you don't bring one, it will definitely rain. Or, if you want to chase after someone, if you don't turn around right now, you may miss out on the moment he needs you the most. After hearing Long Jie's words, Tong Ning left the queue without hesitation and ran over to where she had just left the car. Luckily, because of the traffic, Mo Ting's car had not completely left the airport. Tong Ning ran over without hesitation, pulled open the car door and sat down in her original seat. Mo Ting was a little surprised. Why did you come back? Tell Lu Che to immediately arrange for an examination. Before I see the results, I won't leave in peace, Tong Ning finally said in seriousness. For you, this is a small matter. But, I've been worried about going overseas. Do you think it's still too small? Mo Ting stretched out his hand and gently stroked Tong Ning's cheek. He had once again given up on resisting. How could he have the heart to chase someone away when they had already sent her all the way back? So, He immediately asked Lu Che to contact the hospital. Accompanied by Tong Ning, they both went to the hospital for an examination. In the end, they received a report. There were no abnormalities. However, due to her high concentration at work, her brain would occasionally protest. "Do you feel completely at ease now?" Mo Ting asked as he held onto Tong Ning's shoulder. "It's really just a small matter." Tong Ning looked at Mo Ting and felt relieved. But, thinking about his headache, Tong Ning grabbed onto Mo Ting's arm and said, "Come with me to England. I will work and make sure you rest." Mo Ting sighed. He felt heartache and helplessness towards Tong Ning. "Okay." As soon as Lu Che heard this, he was a little surprised. He thought to himself, his CEO used to be unshakable and had never been shaken by anyone. Yet, he had now completely fallen into a henpecked husband. But, this was a good thing, a really good thing. Perhaps, the only person in the world that could make Mo Ting listen to him was Tong Ning. In the end, Tong Ning missed her flight. So, Mo Ting had no choice but to ask Lu Che to arrange for a private jet so she wouldn't miss her flight. Inside the luxurious cabin, Lu Che and Long Jie sat on opposite ends of the plane. One was reading documents and the other was watching videos. Meanwhile, Mo Ting was lying in Tong Ning's arms. This was the first time. Tong Ning spread open her arms and hugged him to sleep. Chapter 199. In the quiet private hospital, Lan Shi woke up to the pungent smell of disinfectant. After opening her eyes, she stared blankly at the hospital room ceiling. Luo Hao stayed by her bedside. Seeing her wake up, he quickly asked, "Are you all right? Are you still dizzy? How is Cheng Tian?" Lan Shi asked in a raspy voice. Luo Hao pondered for a moment and answered truthfully, "It had a great impact and attracted the attention of the police, but I have asked the legal team to cooperate with the investigation. As for the murder and kidnapping, the police can't produce any evidence at the moment, so it shouldn't be a big problem. However, a lot of collaborations have already been cancelled, including commercials and endorsements. Apart from Tong Ning, even Hua Yuan has been given the cold shoulder." After hearing Luo Hao's words, Lan Shi turned around and faced away from him. She closed her eyes and broke down in tears. "Cheng Tian has been destroyed by my hands." Luo Hao did not know how to comfort Lan Shi, so he simply sat quietly and cried with her. After quite some time, Luo Hao finally asked Lan Shi, "There are reporters everywhere outside. The doctor said you are fine. Do you want to go home and get some rest? What difference does it make where we are now?" Lan Shi asked Luo Hao. Luo Hao couldn't stand Lan Shi's dispirited look anymore. He stood up and grabbed onto Lan Shi's shirt. "After all these years, you've overcome everything. Can't you take a little setback? Cheng Tian Entertainment hasn't closed down yet. There are so many people waiting for you to help them solve their problems. Is there any use in hiding? Don't forget, Tong Ning's contract is still with Cheng Tian. Right now, she's doing well. It is also an honor for Cheng Tian." "Yes." Lan Shi suddenly sneered as she freed herself from Luo Hao's grip and sat up. "Tong Ning is still in our hands, she can forget about going anywhere. I am going to use this contract to tie her down." Seeing Lan Shi had regained some of her fighting spirit, Luo Hao slowly relaxed. He pulled out his phone and walked out of the room to give his assistant a call. "What is it?" "Director," a young woman came to the office and insisted on looking for Tong Ning. She kept saying that her life was at stake. From the looks of it, she's not Tong Ning's fan. As Tong Ning belonged to Cheng Tian, the woman went straight to Cheng Tian Entertainment. But, little did she know, her actions had almost destroyed Tong Ning. "Ask her what she wants." "She won't say," the assistant replied, "but it looks like he's really in a hurry, and he's too lazy to leave the company lobby. I'll deal with it when I get back." After speaking, Luo Hao hung up the phone. By the time he returned to the hospital room, Lan Shi had already changed. "I'm going back to the company." Luo Hao nodded as he helped her carry her luggage. With the help of the hospital security, the couple returned to Cheng Tian Entertainment. When he entered the hall, his assistant was waiting at the door. When he saw Luo Hao, he immediately greeted him. He pointed to the girl pacing back and forth in the hall and said, "It's her." Luo Hao nodded. After sending Lan Shi back to her office, he walked over to the girl and asked, "Miss, I heard you are in a hurry to find Tongning." "Why?" Hearing Luo Hao's question, the long-haired girl quickly stood up and said, "I'm looking for her to save a life." "Save what life? Can you give me her contact information?" the man asked Luo Hao sincerely. "Please do me a favor." Luo Hao was silent for a few seconds before replying, "I'm sorry, I am the company's director and Tongning is a model. For the sake of Tongning's safety, I can't reveal her private information to you. However, you can tell me what happened and I will help you pass on the message. As for whether she's willing to contact you, that will depend on her." The woman was a little troubled, but she understood Luo Hao's difficulties. So, she decided to tell him the truth. "It's because Tongning promised to save someone. But, I can't tell you who this person is. She is currently in a critical situation, so I decided to contact Cheng Tian. I've already contacted Tongning through various channels, but she's too famous at the moment. It's too difficult to see her. I hope you can tell her that no matter what the Han family has done, at least that person hasn't wronged her. Since she promised to save someone, she shouldn't go back on her word." "What illness? Why didn't you ask the hospital for help?" "If I could, then I wouldn't need to look for Tongning. Anyway, I hope you can pass on my message." "Thank you." After speaking, the woman wrote down her contact details and handed it to Luo Hao. She then gave Luo Hao a deep bow before leaving Cheng Tian's lobby. Luo Hao looked at the number in his hand. Without a word, he crumpled the note into a ball and threw it into the bin. Surnamed Han, Luo Hao returned to his office and immediately instructed his assistant to look into Han Yufan's information. It didn't take long before he found out that Han Yufan had a younger sister. Most importantly, she was seriously ill. Looking at the information his assistant handed him, Luo Hao suddenly leaned back in his chair. Sometimes, one could wear out iron shoes in fruitless searching only to find what they were looking for without even looking. Tongning, this time, let's see who can keep their composure and who will emerge victorious. Of course, he couldn't possibly tell Tongning about this woman's request. London. Tongning was filming a fashion blockbuster on the streets. As the last model to appear on JK Fashion Week, in a short period of time, she had become famous in the fashion industry and received countless resources. Mo Ting was dressed in a trench coat as he sat by the side of the street. He had no work to do, so he was relaxed. All he could do was follow the filming crew and secretly follow his wife. After filming her blockbuster, Tongning turned around to look for Mo Ting. However, he was nowhere to be found. Tongning grabbed her phone from Long Jie and quickly sent Mo Ting a message. "Where are you? Can't I even go to the bathroom?" Mo Ting smiled. Tongning was in a good mood as she teased, "Don't run around. Be careful that I don't want you anymore. Find your own way home." Mo Ting was relaxed, but Lu Che was busy. Similarly, in London, Mo Ting was out shopping while Lu Che was in a hotel, helping Mo Ting hold video conferences and recording important events. "Madam, if this goes on, I'm going to get a migraine." Hua Rong's reporter had no idea what Tongning was up to 2 days ago. It wasn't easy for him to finally find out about her schedule. So, he was currently rushing over to Tongning's workplace. According to Tongning's mysterious schedule, she definitely wasn't simply working. Plus, even though he was so strict, Tongning still managed to avoid his cameras and return to Beijing. From this, one could see how cautious she was. But, the more cautious she was, the more curious he became about Tongning. He refused to believe that Tongning would always be so cautious. As for the man that drove her to the airport in the US, he was definitely going to appear again. Chapter 200. In order to find out Han Shinna's exact situation, Luo Hao asked someone to find the woman's contact details from the bin. Without anyone knowing, he found her home address. The man obviously didn't expect Luo Hao to personally visit. He thought Tongning had some news, so when he invited Luo Hao in, he was all smiles. "Are you here to tell me that Shinna can be saved?" Luo Hao looked at the woman's innocent face and gently curved his lips. Can you tell me about Han Xin's situation? The girl thought for a moment and sat down on the sofa next to Luo Hao. She explained to him, Xin and I met in high school. Later, we went abroad to study together. But Xin kidney has always been bad. All the donors we found failed to match. Afterwards, Xin's illness flared up and we returned to China. Afterwards, Han Yufan brought Tongning here to do a match for Xin. So many people failed, but Tongning's kidney was a complete success. The woman lowered her head and sighed. Afterwards, we all found out about what happened at Tianyi. Xin knew her brother had wronged Tongning, so she never mentioned asking Tongning for a kidney transplant again. She knew the Han family owed Tongning a lot. Because of this, Xin had a complete falling out with the Han family. Right now, she's all alone in the hospital. Actually, I've wanted to look for Tongning for a long time, but Xin kept stopping me. Recently, Xin's health has been getting worse. I was afraid she wouldn't be able to hold on, so I tried all sorts of methods to look for Tongning. Isn't Tongning a model from your agency? That's why I came looking for you. The woman was a complete outsider to the industry, so she had no idea about the undercurrents within. All she knew was that Tongning belonged to Cheng Tian, but she had no idea how bad her relationship with Cheng Tian was. I've been holding it in for a long time. Since Tongning has personally agreed, you should at least give me an explanation. The doctor said that for a normal person, one kidney is more than enough to keep their body functioning. After hearing the woman's words, Luo Hao weighed the situation in his heart and asked, is her condition serious? Her kidneys are failing too badly. She's already in the middle stage of uremia. Dialysis won't be able to relieve much of her pain. The girl said, her voice choking. After hearing this, Luo Hao nodded his head. I've already contacted Tongning, but she doesn't seem to remember what happened and hasn't given me a reply. Plus, she's currently working in England, so I can't talk to her face to face. The girl's expression changed. She pursed her lips and finally nodded. No matter what, thank you. You're welcome. After that, Luo Hao stood up. When he left the girl's house, he accidentally heard the girl say something behind his back. The people in that industry are indeed untrustworthy. Isn't Tongning the same? Chapter 201. She seemed to have no idea that in front of her and Lu Che was a piece of glass. From time to time, Lu Che lifted his head and saw Long Jie smiling at him from behind. Her infatuated expression gave him goosebumps. Most importantly, Lu Che turned around and asked Long Jie, why do you keep sneaking glances at me? Hearing this question, Long Jie's mind went blank as her face turned red and she lowered her head. Lu Che, you bastard. Idiot. Do you really have a negative EQ? Why did you have to say something so embarrassing? Plus, do you really not like me looking at you? Long Jie's heart was suddenly overwhelmed by this possibility. But, to be able to be alone like this, she was already satisfied. How could she ask for more? With this thought, Long Jie calmed herself down. However, just as she lifted her head and was about to look through Tongning's contract again, a handsome face suddenly appeared in front of her. Long Jie was so shocked that she quickly took a step back. What are you doing? I'm showing you. What's the point of looking at my back? Long Jie held onto her wildly beating heart. She suddenly felt a little flustered. Especially as she looked at Lu Che's bright eyes, she didn't know what to do. She wasn't sure if Lu Che was doing this on purpose or if he really thought she should see his back. Don't tease me like this, Long Jie roared in her heart. She really wanted to pounce on him. Lu Che stared at Long Jie for a while. After deciding she had seen enough, he stood up and said, sit in front of me. Knowing someone is looking at me from behind makes me feel a little creeped out. Long Jie. Most importantly, shouldn't this idiot be concerned about why she was sneaking glances at him? A negative EQ was really hopeless. Long Jie was a little angry. She grabbed the contract and sat down where Lu Che was sitting. She lowered her head and immersed herself in her own world. She no longer wanted to be the one sneaking glances. Being with someone like Lu Che was going to anger her to death sooner or later. Lu Che bit his pen as he looked at Long Jie's back. The corners of his lips naturally curved upwards. Am I allowed to look at you? I also want to look at you. 2 days later, Tongning finished all her work at JK and threw herself into international magazine cover shoots. One schedule followed the next. Sometimes, she even had to attend a few shows in one day. However, as she shone at the London Fashion Week, people from all over the world began to pay attention to this charming oriental face. At the end of the day, Mo Ting had to return to Beijing. Tongning returned to the manor after nightfall. By this time, Mo Ting had already packed his luggage and was leaning against the car door waiting for her. Because he had rested for a few days, Mo Ting's spirit had recovered and the fatigue on his handsome face was gone. Tongning was extremely satisfied, so she hugged and kissed Mo Ting in front of the car. When I return home, I will be able to fight side by side with you, Tongning promised as she lay on Mo Ting's chest. I will definitely do what I promised you. Mo Ting stretched out his hand and stroked his wife's soft hair. He then placed a kiss on the top of her head. I've already left a bodyguard for you. No matter what happens, give me a call as soon as possible. I know, Tongning nodded in seriousness. Let's go home early. If you are at home, where can I escape to? After speaking, Tongning stood on her tiptoes and placed a kiss on Mo Ting's lips. Mo Ting hooked his arm around Tongning's neck and took the opportunity to deepen the kiss until the couple couldn't breathe. However, they did not notice that behind the high walls, there was a reporter hanging from a tree and secretly taking pictures of the manor. Because it was night time and he was quite a distance away, he couldn't get a picture of the man leaning against the car. But, their kiss was so obvious that no matter how blurry it was, it couldn't escape the camera. Although the reporter from Hua Rong Studio was disappointed that he couldn't get a picture of the man's face, at least he managed to get a picture of Tongning and the man being intimate. The reporter scoffed. He finally lived up to his expectations. After experiencing so much pain, he finally got what he wanted. Tongning, just you wait to explain everything to everyone. After sending Mo Ting off, Tongning once again returned to the manor. She stared quietly at the sofa the couple were lying on and suddenly felt a sense of loneliness. Just a second ago, the man had just left, but now, her heart was starting to miss him. But, Tongning understood, in order to become a supermodel, she needed to produce enough results on the international runway. This was something she couldn't achieve no matter how hard she struggled on the Beijing runway. Of course, apart from her, Long Jie was also feeling depressed. Although she had to put up with the idiot's low EQ after spending so much time with Lu Che, at least she was able to see him. Now that he was gone, no matter how busy she was at night, there wouldn't be anyone to complain about being tired with her. Okay, tomorrow you will have a new job to do. When we get busy, you won't have time to think too much. Long Jie knew Tongning missed Mo Ting, so she patted her on the shoulder comfortingly. Tongning was silent for a moment before she suddenly turned around and said to Long Jie, "You too." Long Jie's face turned red. She stuttered, "You, what are you talking about?" Did she really need to expose her thoughts? Tongning smiled. In just a short span of 2 days, Chengtian Entertainment's news had been pushed out of the search rankings by New News. Even the recording that was hanging on the headlines could no longer attract the attention of the netizens. Over the past few days, She had been busy running around trying to talk to old friends. Cheng Tian's situation had improved slightly, but the main reason was because Tongning was still there. Only Luo Hao's whereabouts were a little strange. He had placed all his attention on Han Xin's incident, especially on the friend that had helped her fight for justice. However, the words that came out of his mouth could never be true, especially when it came to Tongning. He simply continued to deepen the misunderstanding the girl had towards Tongning. For example, at this moment, he directly went to the girl's house with money and told her, Tongning is a model, it's normal for her to take care of her body. So, she hopes Xina can understand. But, she obviously promised Xina that she would save her. The girl was a little angry from Luo Hao's nagging. Yuan, you need to understand. Tongning is a model, she can't possibly give up on her work. This is a breach of contract. I don't know what breach of contract is. All I know is, Tongning is not trustworthy, the girl called Yuan Yuan said angrily. She has not kept her promise to Shina. How dare she be the #1 model? She is not worthy. Also, take your money back. If you want money, I have plenty of it. Chapter 202. In front of Yuan Yuan, Luo Hao appeared helpless and anxious. It was as if he wanted to help, but was powerless to do so. After leaving Yuan Yuan's home, he lowered his head and sneered. In this world, there was going to be another person that hated Tongning. In the end, Yuan Yuan angrily visited Han Shina at the hospital. At this time, Han Shina, who was suffering from her illness, was watching a collection of Tongning's runway shows. Yuan Yuan stretched out her head and took a quick glance before snatching the video out of Han Shina's hands. Do you still think she's good? This woman never wanted to save you. Han Shina noticed Yuan Yuan's mood wasn't right, so she sat up and asked, "What's wrong with you recently? Why are you always saying bad things about Tongning?" "I went to Tongning's agency, but the people from Chengtian actually tried to bribe me with money. They said Tongning doesn't remember agreeing to donate a kidney to you. They also said that as a model, her body is important. What they mean is, she doesn't want to donate." As soon as Han Shina heard this, her eyelashes gently trembled as she grabbed onto Yuan Yuan's arm. "Why did you go to Chengtian? Chengtian can't wait to trample Tongning to death. Don't you know you could be used by others?" Yuan Yuan froze for a moment before looking at Han Shina. "Are you serious? I told you to pay more attention to the entertainment news." Han Shina glared at her as her emotions gradually calmed down. She then asked, "You said Tongning doesn't remember agreeing to donate a kidney to me. Did you hear it with your own ears? Since you didn't speak to Tongning directly, why would you believe the words of a middleman?" Yuan Yuan was speechless, unable to refute. "By the way, Yuan Yuan, I've told you many times, Tongning has no relationship with me. Whether it's in terms of responsibility or morality, she has no reason to save me. You are a highly educated person, don't tell me you don't understand this." After Han Shina finished speaking, she noticed Yuan Yuan did not respond. So, she propped up her weak body and asked, "The day Cheng Tian sees you again, you must tell me. I will definitely let you see their true colors." Yuan Yuan thought for a moment and decided she should trust her friend more. So, she nodded her head, "I simply don't want anything to happen to you. I will be fine." After working in London for half a month, Tongning's sleep had decreased to 4 hours a day. But, because of her hard work over the past half a month, Tongning had secured a number of global endorsements for luxury brands, as well as attending important shows for world-renowned brands. Tongning was right. Previously, when An Zihao left, she did not cancel her contract with Cheng Tian. As a result, Lan she couldn't even take care of herself and couldn't do anything to help her. Currently, Tongning was going to hand the important contracts to Mo Ting to review. As for the rest, she and Long Jie would discuss it together. As for the interviews and remuneration, they would negotiate on their own. Because Tongning wanted opportunities, she wasn't unreasonable and her demands were reasonable. This satisfied many of her business partners. As Tongning had been overseas for a long period of time, news about her within the country had decreased. She no longer needed to use her popularity to fight for fashion resources. After JK, she had already gotten past the awkward stage. However, she had no idea, beneath the seemingly calm surface of Beijing, there was actually a turbulent undercurrent. Luo Hao and Cheng Tian had not been completely resolved. During this time, Lan she had used her connections to poach a few newcomers with potential from other agencies. However, even though Lan she did not ask about Tongning's matters, she had been keeping an eye on her. Seeing Tongning's achievements on the international runway, she no longer contacted Luo Hao. It seemed, she was ready to admit defeat. What else could she do to stop her? Every day, Long Jie would sit in the study room and draw a red cross on the calendar. She would calculate how many days it would be before she returned to China and how long it would be before she could see Lu Che again. Tongning even noticed Long Jie had lost weight during this time. She wasn't sure if it was due to the torture of work or because she missed Lu Che. Tongning returned to her bedroom and lay in bed talking to Mo Ting on the phone. No matter how late it was, Tongning needed to hear Mo Ting's voice before she could fall asleep. So, Mo Ting now had a new job to do. Sometimes, Tongning would fall asleep with her phone in her hand, but Mo Ting would not hang up on her. He would leave the phone on until she woke up the next day and Mo Ting would continue to say good morning to her. Lu Che had seen this scene many times. He once thought to himself, although his president wasn't in the UK, his daily routine was in sync with the British. Ting, how many days until I return? 4 days, Mo Ting replied gently over the phone. 4 days. I'll get through it if I grit my teeth, Tongning replied as she washed her face. I really missed you too much. If it took any longer, I wouldn't be able to hold on any longer. I just returned from the UK 2 days ago. Mo Ting's voice was a little helpless but doting. So, you don't miss me anymore? When I left 2 days ago, I clearly expressed how much I missed you. After hearing this, Tongning's face turned red. Wait for me, I'll be back soon. Wait for me. Everything she did was for the sake of being as glorious as the sun. Mo Ting looked at the wedding ring on his finger and seemed to have come to a realization. We still need to love each other for the rest of our lives. I'll wait for you. Tongning smiled in satisfaction. It seemed, as long as Mo Ting was guiding her, no matter how tired she was, she would still be able to move forward. Half a month after Han Xin'er requested to see Luo Hao finally came to see Yuan Yuan again. Yuan immediately gave her driver a phone call and instructed him to pick Xin'er up from the hospital without anyone noticing. Luo Hao had no idea. Every time he came, he would come with an apologetic message and a message that Tongning wanted to pass to Han Xin'er. Tongning will be returning to the UK in a few days. She asked me to ask you not to use Xin'er's incident to create hype. It hasn't been easy for her to get to where she is today. She doesn't want anything to affect her status. Yuan looked at Luo Hao. With Han Xin'er's warning, she had become a little smarter, so she deliberately said, I've long since given up hope that she'll keep her promise. Status? Is she even worthy of being a model? If anything happens to Xin'er, I will make sure she regrets it for the rest of her life. Yuan, don't be so extreme. Tongning has no choice. HMMPH, Yuan scoffed. Tongning also said that you can name any condition you want. Mr. Luo, please be honest with me. What were Tongning's exact words? Yuan deliberately tried to get information out of Luo Hao. Seeing Yuan was angry, Luo Hao held it in for a moment before replying, Han Xin'er? What has she got to do with me? Isn't her death a good thing? Shouldn't the entire Han family die? How could she expect me to save her? I am a famous model. Why would I give up a kidney for someone I have nothing to do with? Dream on. Did she really say that? Yuan's face turned red. Luo Hao nodded his head as he looked at Yuan and said firmly, those are Tongning's exact words. At this time, the door to the Yuan family home's dining room suddenly opened. Han Xin'er snuck in through the side door and approached Luo Hao and Yuan with the help of the housekeeper. She looked at Luo Hao with a pale face and asked, did Tongning say this? Are you sure? Chapter 203. Luo Hao glanced at Yuan and then at Han Xin'er. All of a sudden, he lost his confidence. He had never met Han Xin'er before. All he knew was that she had been sick for a long time, but he didn't know much else about her. He originally thought there was no need to waste so much energy on someone that was about to die. So, at this moment, he couldn't figure out why Han Xin'er's eyes were filled with anger. Was it because he had made up the things Tongning said? Regardless, he was already in a difficult position. All he could do was maintain his calm and nod his head. Of course, Tongning said it. I am her director, why would I slander her? Han Xin'er looked at Luo Hao from top to bottom. She then smiled and squeezed out 2 words from her chest, you're lying. Mr. Luo, don't think that just because Yuan is simple, you can fool everyone. Cheng Tian Entertainment has been suppressing Tongning step by step. Did you think everyone is blind just because Yuan doesn't like to go online? The recording of Cheng Tian slandering Tangning has been on the top searches for so long. Do you think everyone is stupid? Luo Hao was suddenly left speechless by Han Xin's words. He had no way to refute her. He had never expected Han Xin to get involved. Plus, how long have I known Tangning? Whether she would say something like that or not, shouldn't I know? Do I need you to find out? In reality, you haven't even spoken to Tangning on the phone, have you? Han Xin's body was weak. Because she had been suffering from her illness for years, her body was in a bad state. But she was a girl in her early 20s. Even though she was sick, she still used her firm stand to defend the person she believed in and admired. Mr. Luo, go back and tell your CEO, Lan Shi, not to try and use me to attack Tangning. I will not let her succeed. Also, please stay away from my friend. She is a simple girl, she can't afford to be hurt by scheming people like you. Please go ahead. In the end, Han Xin said, go ahead. She didn't even give Luo Hao a chance to speak. She had clearly expressed her stance. She did want to live a healthy life, but it was never at the cost of harming others and harming others. Actually, before Tangning broke up with her brother, she had already sensed something was wrong with her brother. At that time, she really wanted to remind Tangning not to be so stupid. Luckily, Tangning woke up on her own and stood up again. The reborn Tangning gave her the courage to continue living. She had been trying to absorb strength from Tangning. In fact, she even tried to emulate her idol's style of doing things. So, she watched all of Tangning's runway shows and magazine covers. In her heart, there was no one more important than Tangning. Because of this person's faith, she had the courage to overcome difficult times. Luo Hao didn't say anything, because he felt a burning pain on his cheek, and it was a hard slap from a little girl in her early 20s. As a result, he left the Yuan family's villa in a straight line. No one knew what he was thinking as he left. As soon as Luo Hao left, Han Xin couldn't help but take a few steps back. Yuan immediately reached out her hand to hold her. Don't be so agitated. If I wasn't excited, you wouldn't even know that you were sold by him. Han Xin pushed Yuan on the head. Idiot, from now on, can you stop thinking with your butt? If I really wasn't around, what would you do? Yuan choked up as she hugged onto her best friend, unwilling to let go. But Han Xin was also exhausted, so she fainted in Yuan's arms. Yuan was so shocked that she immediately rushed her back to the hospital. This wasn't something that money could solve. Did she really have to break the law and buy someone else's health? If Tangning didn't become the donor, then who else could save Xin? Not a single member of the Han family could be relied on. Above all, Han Xin was admitted to the ICU. Even Yuan had to stay within the designated time to visit her. However, the first thing that Han Xin said after waking up was that she was worried Tangning would be caught red-handed by Cheng Tian because of the promise she had made. If she died, then she died. This was fate and no one could change it. But Tangning still had a long road ahead of her. So, when Yuan came to visit, Han Xin simply said, Yuan, can you help me look for my brother? I want to see him. Isn't your brother parking the car for the hotel? I want to see him. She wanted Han Yufan to promise her that if one day, Tangning was implicated because of this incident, he would step out to clear her name. Meanwhile, when Han Yufan saw his sister, apart from feeling heartache, he also smiled bitterly. You don't need to worry too much about Tangning because her husband is the CEO of Hai Rui. Han Xin was stunned for a moment and did not say a word. But this did not affect her respect for Tangning. Because Tangning was still the same Tangning. Do you regret it? Tangning was once so loyal to you, yet you insisted on having an affair with Mo Euro. Han Yufan's arrogance had long been worn away. Right now, he didn't want to think about anything else. All he wanted to do was earn some money and start afresh. After Han Yufan and Yuan left, Han Xin lay in bed to get some rest. However, she kept hearing the sound of a camera shutter. So, she pretended to be asleep the entire time. As she felt the footsteps approach her, Han Xin slightly opened her eyes. She discovered the medical staff had not only taken a photo of her, he had also taken a photo of her medical records on the bedside table. Han Xin'er had a feeling Luo Hao was going to use this incident to suppress Tongning, or even he wanted to destroy her completely. Han Xin'er wondered if she could get in touch with Tongning. If she couldn't, then who could she look for? That evening, as the sky turned blood red, Cheng Tian Entertainment hung up Tongning's poster in the most eye-catching spot in the building. Lan Shi had already thought it through. At a time when Cheng Tian Entertainment was suffering, there was no need to go against money and benefits. After Luo Hao entered Cheng Tian, he simply glanced at it briefly before heading back to his office. However, Lan Shi called out to him, "Tongning will be returning in a few days. Let's hold a celebratory dinner for her. She's returning soon." Luo Hao thought for a moment. It seemed it was time to send Han Xin'er on her way early. Once an artist's life was involved, there was no other way out. All they could do was fall from the highest point and be smashed to pieces. Han Xin'er also felt the same way. She was like a bomb, but who could she look for help? Mo Ting. Could she? You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.